Meeting of Owen Sound City Council. It's good to see such a live group here this evening. We did not have an in-camera meeting this evening. We are in the regular council meeting. I'll invite everyone present to join in a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Are there any items additional for tonight's agenda? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question of staff regarding, or I have a request of staff regarding the water at Harrison Park.
Okay. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship, I have something about OSM.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I would like to speak about the Sports Hall of Fame, the inductee ceremony.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Purdon?
And one item about the One World Festival.
Okay. Any other members of council? Seeing none. Disclosure of pecuniary interest? None. Confirmation of the minutes, please, from April 28th.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, the minutes of the regular council meeting held on April 28th, 2014 as printed be adopted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Minutes of the special joint council meeting held between Owen Sound and Georgian Bluffs.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright, that the minutes of the special council meeting between Owen Sound and Georgian Bluffs held on May 5th, 2014 as printed be adopted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. A resolution moving council into committee of the whole, please.
And moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, that City Council now go into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, report, matters tabled, notions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried also. We're now in committee of the whole. We have one public meeting this evening. That's with regards to zoning bylaw amendment number 13. And I have a script to get this meeting rolling. First, a motion to adjourn the council meeting, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Lemon. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The public meeting is now open. And I have a prescribed statement that I have to read. Which I have to read it twice, so it may sound the same, but it's slightly different, so listen carefully. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Corporation of the City of Owen Sound before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Corporation of the City of Owen Sound to the Ontario Municipal Board. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Corporation of the City of Owen Sound before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. We are now commencing with our public meeting on this matter, and I will invite the Deputy Clerk with any comments that you have received.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice for this public meeting was circulated to the prescribed bodies, posted on the city's website, and posted in the Sun-Times on April 15th. Additionally, a courtesy mailing to neighboring property owners was provided on April 15th. The comments that were received prior to the agenda being published are included in the agenda package. Since the agenda was published, comments were received from Dr. Gregory Rose and Christy Hempel. These comments were circulated to council and the media and will be added to the agenda for the public's review. All those in attendance for the public meeting, please sign the sign-in sheet located just outside the council chambers so that we can continue to communicate with you regarding this application. Personal information collected at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Planning Act. The information collected will be used to complete the zoning bylaw amendment process and will form part of the public record. Questions about this collection should be addressed to myself.
Thank you. And I'll invite Ann Balaban, our Manager of Planning and Heritage, to provide an overview presentation, please, for the members of the public and council. I'll also remind council that this is a public meeting. We are here tonight to listen to the members of the public and the presentation we're about to receive.
Thank you, Your Worship. The application is by Cuesta Planning Consultants on behalf of E.C. King Limited. The application is a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the open storage of aggregate and associated shipping of the material from the federal harbor. The subject property is located on the north side of 17th Street East and is a 6-hectare or 15-acre site immediately adjacent to the federal harbor lands. The site is located at the end of 17th Street East and is bound on the west side by Georgian Bay and the Inner Harbour, on the south side by 17th Street East and the Public Health Unit building, on the north by hazard lands, the public walkway, and the Best Western Hotel, and to the east by vacant lands and 2nd Avenue East, which has office, commercial, and residential development along it. The following are pictures of the surroundings. The first picture, you're looking south, and you can see this is the actual area where the site is proposed to be redeveloped, where the cars are parked. That's the paved portion of the site. Now you're looking west. This is looking south. No, this is mixed up, sorry. I need to go back, hang on. Why is it not going back? Oh, hang on, now I'll go forward. Okay, so this is looking not south, this is looking west. The slides got mixed up, I'm sorry. So this is looking west. This is looking south, because now you can see the okay, so this is the hazard lines. You're right, this is north, the hazard lines, and this is where the new trail is, pretty close to where the new trail would be located. This is northeast. You can see the BDO building. This is east-ish, a bit still. And so you can see the BDO building, 17th Street and 1st Street East. This is east. This is basically southeast, the parking lot for the health unit building. This is pretty much directly south into the, looking right into the health unit entrance parking lot. This again is south. This is again looking back at the site. In terms of process to date, we've done a pre-consultation, and that took place in 2013 to determine what additional studies and supporting documentation would be required with the formal application. The reports submitted with the application include a planning report, a traffic impact study, a land use compatibility study, which looks at noise, air quality, and sound levels, as well as a stormwater management study. The application was deemed to be complete. Notice of complete application and this public meeting was given on April the 15th. An amended technical report was provided to council on April the 28th. The amended report was provided to clarify the intent of the application. The application is for rezoning to add a new use as a permitted use, and it is not a temporary use bylaw. And that brings us to tonight, the public meeting, and the focus of this meeting is to receive public input on the application. All the items that were part of the application, including the reports that have been written to date, are available on the city's website at www.owensound.ca/planning/. The following few slides will outline the technical details of the application, and the application is divided into three parts. Part 1, the applicant has requested to rezone the mixed-use industrial portion of the site to permit a new use being outside storage. At the current time, the MU zone permits industrial uses along with indoor storage. Therefore, an amendment is required to the zoning bylaw. The second part is that the applicant has requested to remove the holding symbol from the portion of the site zoned mixed-use industrial holding, or MUH. A holding provision can be added to the zoning on a site in order to require an applicant to fulfill specific conditions prior to development. In this case, because these lands were previously used for industrial purposes, the city wanted to ensure that prior to any reuse to a more sensitive use, that a developer would be required to comply to the Environmental Protection Act. Part 3, the amendment is a zone boundary change between the MU and the MC, the MUH and the MCH as shown on there. The slide shows an excerpt from the zoning bylaw to identify the lands that are subject to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, which also shows where the new MU MC line would be located, which is that hatched area would be the new MU area. The zone boundary would reflect the existing paved portion of the site, and that will be used for the proposed aggregate storage. The current MU zone fronting on 17th Street is approximately 101 meters in length. The proposed frontage of the adjusted MU zone would be approximately 125 meters in length, for a total increase of approximately 22 meters. This slide shows the proposed site plan. The paved portion of the area is where the proposed aggregate storage would take place. Now, as you can see, it's down in the bottom right corner, basically, there are those little 6 circles. Those would be the temporary aggregate dumping piles, and that's in the southeast corner of the site. There's a truck turnaround just basically on top of those 6 little circles. That's where the trucks would pull in and be able to turn around and make their way back out of the site. The large kidney-shaped area is for storage of the accumulated aggregate pile. There will also be 2 hoppers, one to move the aggregate from the temporary aggregate piles over to the accumulating storage pile. So that long, sort of thin with the little square on the end, that's one hopper, and the other one that looks the same closer to the harbor wall is the other hopper. So the one is to move from the temporary piles to the large pile. The other is to move from the large pile over to the barge. There will also be a 3.25 meter acoustic barrier block wall constructed around the perimeter. And it's that sort of a white, wider line that you can see sort of around the whole perimeter of the site. I don't know, can you identify where that is? Is everybody seeing it? Okay. There will be a trail relocation, and it will be paved. It's to be used during the loading of the barge. The site currently has the city currently has an easement over the Miller land shown as Part 2, and that's for the pedestrian pathway that we currently have. The proposal includes a continuation of the pedestrian pathway for active transportation opportunities, and that's that curved dotted line area that comes around the right side of the slide. There will be gates at either end of the current pathway, and they'll be closed when the barge is being loaded in order to redirect pedestrian traffic to the new pathway just while the barge is being loaded. Loading is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. From Monday to Saturday. There would be 4 trucks per hour, which equals 48 trucks per day coming in. It will take 6 days to build one pile and 1 day to load the barge. Now, this is about the provincial policy statement. It's meant to be read in its entirety. The technical report that I've written includes several policies, and these are a few of the policies that were outlined in the report. The PPS provides directions on matters of provincial interest related to planning and development. The PPS was recently revised and new policies were added in many areas, including those with regard to airports, rail, and marine facilities. With regard to land use compatibility, major facilities and sensitive land uses should be planned to ensure they are designed and buffered or separated to prevent or mitigate adverse effects from odor, noise, and contaminants, to minimize the risk to public health and safety, and to ensure the long-term viability of these major facilities. Public spaces like trails and open space are required to promote active, healthy communities, to foster active transportation and meet the needs of pedestrians and create connected, active communities. As well, airports, rail, and marine facilities are to be planned to promote their long-term operation and protect their economic role. As well, these uses should be appropriately designed and buffered in accordance with the land use compatibility policies that I mentioned on the previous slide. Long-term economic prosperity should be supported by providing efficient, cost-effective, multimodal transportation systems to move goods and people. This is a portion of the official plan, Schedule A4, that depicts land use designation for the site. As you can see, the site is designated waterfront mixed use, commercial, residential, institutional, and open space with an overlay of marine industrial. Like the PPS, the official plan is meant to be read in its entirety, and the technical report includes a review of several policies. The East Harbour planning area applies to the lands. The site is designated waterfront mixed use and open space with the marine industrial overlay, and on land use schedule A4 as shown on the previous slide. The intent of the East Harbour planning area is to provide for an array of development opportunities while promoting intensification over time. The marine industrial use policies encourages uses that rely on shipping and discourages uses that are not dependent on the harbor or water access for the use. In this area, loading and unloading of ships is permitted. Storage buildings are not permitted in this area. The zoning bylaw implements the policies of the official plan. The mixed-use industrial zone permits a large number of uses, ranging from offices, retail, transportation depot, light industrial, and industrial uses. So next steps. The focus of tonight's meeting is to gather public input. We've received reports. The city staff require that the transportation study be expanded and that a peer review be completed. As well, the land use compatibility study will also require a peer review. The planning recommendation report will include the details of the 2 peer reviews. It will include a summary in response to the public comments received. And finally, I would encourage everyone here to sign the public meeting sign-in sheet so that we have all the information necessary to keep you informed about this application as it moves along.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We also have a presentation from Genevieve Scott, a planner with Aquesta Planning Consultants. just looking for the lead. Thank you. Oh, I'll just let you do that. Good evening, Mayor Haswell and members of council and staff. My name is Genevieve Scott. I work for Questa Planning Consultants, and Questa was retained by Miller Paving, E.C. King, in order to help facilitate the processing of the subject zoning amendment. As Anne has described, the zoning bylaw amendment would permit the open storage of aggregate materials on the subject property in order for the materials to then be loaded onto a barge and shipped to southern markets. The amendment is necessary to remove the holding provision from a portion of the site, adjust the one zone boundary slightly, and finally to allow open storage of materials on the site as the main use on the property. It is the intention of the proponent to test the success of this endeavor for a season or two, with the future possibility of also using the lands for unloading materials onto the site for transportation off-site. The current proposal is to build a stockpile of clear stone aggregate over a period of approximately 6 to 7 working days, and then load the aggregate onto a waiting barge. The stone would be transported to the site by truck, and it is anticipated that 4 trucks or 8 truck trips per hour will be required. It is expected that the loading of the barge will take place within a 24-hour period. During that time, the pedestrian and bicycle traffic will be rerouted around the loading area, and gates and signage will redirect foot and bicycle traffic to a paved path to the east of the operation across the subject lands, as Anne had noted. Hours of operation will be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday to Saturday from May to September, and approximately 6 shipments are anticipated per season. Since the writing of the staff report, our client has received written authorization from Transport Canada to cross the federal lands along the harbour for loading purposes. And I just wanted to note one more thing. I should also note that the stacker that's going to load onto the barge, that's not going to be permanently there. That will be used on the days that it will be loaded. The site will be fenced using temporary chain link fencing, which is similar to what is used on construction sites, and an acoustic barrier wall will be required to be constructed. It is important to note that it is the intention of the proponent to coordinate the timing of the building and completion of the stockpile with the arrival of the barge, in order that the completed stockpile not remain on site for any length of time and be loaded onto the barge as quickly as possible. With respect to off-site impacts, a land use compatibility study was submitted as part of this application in regard to both noise and dust off-site impacts. The study concluded that sound level limits and air quality limits, as outlined by Ministry of Environment guidelines, will be met by the proposal, provided the recommendations of the report are followed by the proponent. The recommendations include that the paved truck haul route on site be kept clean, a prohibition on truck arrivals and dumping while loading the barge, so there won't be any trucks coming to dump while the barge is being loaded, and finally, the construction of the sound barrier. In addition to these recommendations, the proponent is also willing to use misters on site in order to dampen down the stockpile with water in very dry or windy conditions. It is also our understanding that the health unit has concerns with respect to off-site noise and dust impacts on their facility, its staff, and visitors. These concerns have been directed to our noise and dust expert at RWDI, who is currently reviewing these concerns with a view to looking at additional options to further reduce noise impact. Additionally, the city has requested a peer review of the study. City staff has also requested an expanded traffic study, and it is my understanding that currently the project engineer and city and county staff are working together to define what additional work may be needed in this regard.
With respect to local planning policy, the property has a mixed designation of waterfront mixed use, marine industrial, and open space within the East Harbor Secondary Plan. These secondary policies have been identified by city staff as the most applicable policies in regard to the proposal, as this policy contains more detailed and specific land use guidance in this area of the city. The area of the property to be rezoned falls within a marine industrial designation. While currently vacant, the property has historically been used for unloading and storage of materials such as potash and salt, and was used for this purpose primarily in the late 70s. The on-site asphalt pad was built for this purpose. The property also has a mixed zoning of mixed-use commercial, mixed-use industrial, and hazard. And once again, the area housing the proposal primarily falls within the industrial zone. The city's official plan encourages a broad range of uses within the harbor area, with shipping-related uses being permitted. The intent of this policy is to maintain a working harbor and allow for industrial uses relying on the harbor to locate in this area. Such uses are valued and encouraged by the official plan, provided the use does not hinder pedestrian and cyclist access to the waterfront, and that safe passage is provided to the public during loading and unloading activities. As outlined earlier, this proposal will provide a paved alternate route to be used by the public on days of barge loading. The proposal certainly meets the intent of the official plan in this regard. We feel the subject proposal is an appropriate use of harborfront lands that are currently designated marine industrial and zoned for industrial use, and that the studies as submitted sufficiently address off-site impacts. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation.
I should also note John Slocum from Gamsby and Manorow is here if there's any traffic questions or questions in regard to stormwater management.
Yeah, there may be a couple of questions
I'm sure.
on one or two of those items, actually.
Possibly,
So,
yeah.
thank you for your presentation,
welcome.
and I'll go to Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions, just to clarify. You made a reference to clear stone. Can you further define what is meant by clear stone as opposed to pit run gravel?
John could probably answer that question more adequately than I in terms of the quality and the
John, if I could just ask you to come up to the podium so everyone can hear you clearly, and just say your name and the company that you're with. For the clerk's records, thank you very much.
Your Worship, through Your Worship,
Thank
the
you.
Clearstone is a product that's made at the quarry that has very little fines associated with it, the smaller particles. In a regular gravel 7/8 or granular A, as we refer to it, has a number of fine particles in it to help bind that material together to make it stronger for building roads. Clearstone has no fines.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. The second question was around the hours of operation. And you indicated that the hours of operation would be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday to Saturday inclusive. It would take 6 days to accumulate enough clear stone to fill one barge.
That's correct.
And you anticipate 6 barge loads a year. So I'm thinking out of that period, May to September, there would be a total of 6 approximately 1 week periods when this would be in use. So it wouldn't be 7 to 7, 6 days a week, continuous from May to September.
That's correct, and the intention is to time it so that the stockpile is ready and the barge is either waiting right there for it to be loaded or very shortly thereafter.
Thank you.
A couple more questions. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Just a question for, I just don't understand this. The barge that's parked on the site there and the hopper that is sitting there, does that hopper move up to fill the barge, or does the barge move up? Is that hopper movable?
Is it movable?
Yes.
Yes, I believe it is. Yes. yes.
It is movable, so
Yes.
it will move up and down. It's not going to be permanently in that corner?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Body.
Thank you. A question for Mr. Slocum. So this stone is crushed, correct? Screened? Actually, if you want to come up to the microphone so the people out there in TV land can hear you. So it's crushed and then it is screened,
Yes.
and then is it washed?
The clear stone, maybe yes.
So it would be washed before it ever leaves the pit, probably?
No, it wouldn't be washed. It would be just crushed and separated, screened. the clear
But
stone.
screened to filter out bigger rocks, and smaller dust would go out in a different pattern or a different
So say
layer?
The clear stone, both products, the clear stone and the say 7/8 crusher run is a manufactured material to certain specifications. So it would be made as a product from the quarry.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other members of council for either of the consultants here? Councillor Purdon.
I'm just needing a little help with the math. How many days of operation, i.e. Days of trucks going to the site, would we anticipate in the 4 months?
Well, around about 6 weeks. I mean, this, give or take. We're anticipating about 6 occurrences throughout the season. So once they know that the barge is coming, they'll prep, build it up, ship it out.
So 6 weeks of truck traffic over the summer,
Yes.
more or less. Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of council? Councillor Lemon.
Well, the thing I find interesting is that Miller is proposing to mitigate any dust, and yet on the west side, where we have the salt piles, close by my home, there's no such mitigation for sound, vibration, or anything else, and residential uses are much, much closer than they would be to this site. Just a comment, and I noticed you in your planning, you don't refer to it directly, but there's no residential housing immediately adjacent to this site. And also, in your talk, you didn't mention there's a calcium depot, liquid calcium depot there, and you didn't mention that that is actually immediately north of the site, and it's filled with liquefied calcium, or it was. I assume it's still in use, and that's trucked out of the site now, and nobody seems to really notice.
I think the planner will only comment on the proposed site plan in front of them at this time. Further questions from council? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will now open the floor to comments from the public, please. Is any member of the public here this evening who would like to provide a verbal comment or present a comment, please come to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Andrew Barton. I'm one of the program managers with the Grey Bruce Health Unit. So I'm glad the health unit was mentioned there. And we do have just we do have some issues. I'm going to perhaps just stick to the 3 main ones if I can. So certainly noise has been mentioned, and it is something that we are concerned about with the current proposal. The proposal states at the moment that the office building across 17th Street is not considered a point of reception, and quoting here from the report, to our knowledge, the spaces within the building are not considered noise-sensitive spaces according to MPC 300. And that's the Ministry of Environment document that's relevant to this particular issue. Of course, the building that we're talking about is the health unit, and it, as you probably know, isn't just an office. Normal operations in there include a variety of clinics and treatment centres, sexual health clinic, vaccine provision, dental treatments, healthy baby clinics, that type of thing. And of course we have the 2 classrooms there that we use fairly extensively ourselves and also used quite extensively by other community partners. So that potentially changes things. The clinics and classrooms are right on that facade, the northwest site there. And if you read the MPC 300 document, classrooms, clinics are actually included as a sensitive receptor. So it's the position of the health unit that that as the building does meet that definition, then it needs to really apply the 50 decibel limit as it has done to the other sensitive receptors, which are the hotel and the housing, that type of thing. Currently, the report as it stands shows a noise level of give or take about 70 decibels at that point, which is quite a lot higher than the 50 decibel level. And I must just comment on the opening presentation there. It was mentioned that the acoustic barrier goes all the way around. It doesn't. It is just in that one corner, and it's a 57-meter long barrier that's designed to reduce the noise impact on some of the houses, but it wouldn't actually have that big an impact on the health unit as it's currently designed. The predicted noise levels are important in a second way too. My understanding is that for the zoning bylaw change, consideration needs to be given as whether or not it is something called a use prohibited in all zones. And part of the definition of that is any usage which cannot meet regulatory standards for emissions. And there's all sorts of emissions there, but it does include both noise and dust emissions. So the regulatory limit, that 50 decibel limit, is obviously relevant not just to the operation of the health unit, but also the zoning side there as well. The second point is dust. The engineering report there shows that the dust is, give or take, around about the 110 microgram per meter level. That's about 90% the regulatory limit. The report, though, does note that these are estimates. And again, quoting from the report, it says they are approximate as dispersion modelling has various sources of potential inaccuracy. That probably wouldn't be an issue if we were at a level that was 10 or 20% the regulatory limit, but when we're up to sort of 90%, I think the concern there is that we're already very close, and it seems reasonable to conclude that if meteorological conditions or there's some sort of surface characteristic there that's a little bit different from the modelling, then we could easily be in excess of those levels. And it is interesting that the method used for modelling there works best on a flat, even plane, and it does note that once you put different terrain in, so obviously where you've got the water and the valley behind, it makes it very difficult to model. So I think that's probably one of the potential sources of inaccuracy. Obviously dust production as well, we're not talking about a remote area, we are looking at an urban area and that open aggregate storage, not within a building. And I guess the final issue as well is land uses. This isn't perhaps so much a regulatory one, but as we're all aware, there is quite a lot of varied language in the official plan. And as was mentioned, the Owen Sounds official plan and Schedule A4 need to be looked at in the whole. And I think there is a sort of balance of language there. And certainly, there is language, of course, that supports industrial uses and also some that suggests a restriction of that industrial uses. And it seems that the overall position is one to try and balance that in favour of a mix of land uses that include residential, retail, commercial, institutional, tourism, recreation, as well as industrial. So it's really trying to get that balance. And I guess I'd submit that the 2012 document, City of Owen Sounds Waterfront Development Opportunities document there, fairly succinctly noted that in a couple of areas. It said that the success of the waterfront will depend on investment and development that make it a desirable destination. The introduction to that document concludes that Owen Sounds Waterfront is a place to invest in residential, retail, restaurant and office development. So again, it's trying to, I think, capture that sort of multimodal usage. So there are sort of three major concerns, and I will leave it to somebody else because I've probably talked enough.
It's fine. Thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Councillor Lemon, you have a question for the health unit.
Yes, I do. Did you happen to look at the strategic plan of the city? which says very definitely that the harbor is to be a mixed-use harbor.
Yeah,
So that sends a very clear message in my mind.
yes, yeah.
Mixed use includes things like unloading and loading, and it also includes small pleasure craft, and includes fishing and many other activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that capturing that mixed use in a way that the various things can coexist, and that's
But
obviously the
it
difficulty.
specifically talks about maritime uses.
Yeah,
And it's in there that we want to say, keep our harbor a working port.
yes.
Okay, Councillor Lemon, we're
Thank
not
you.
going to get into a dialogue. Thank you very much. And another member of council has a question? Councillor Twaddle?
Thank you. Mr. Barton, I'm not sure the question is for you, but you made a reference to the sound barrier only covering a small portion of the site, so perhaps I'm misreading the diagram, and
Yeah, it's actually the black bit in the southwest corner there that is 57 metres long in total by 3.25 metres high, if my eyesight is good enough from here. So it's basically from the area where there's the temporary aggregate dump and sort of up into the driveway.
that's, all right,
That-
because
that's
it,
correct? Yes, right,
Yeah.
to,
so,
I can't.
does anybody have a laser pointer that they could just clarify that?
Yeah, it goes,
There to there.
down.
Yeah.
So you're talking.
So let's all look at the screen at the same time, and you can perhaps outline where this,
Oh, yes, okay, yeah. So my understanding is that it goes from this point here, runs right the way down the edge of the driveway and along to this point here.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
The other berming that's shown is with respect to stormwater management.
Right, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other members of council? Any other members of the public? Thank you.
Good evening, my name's Paul Foster. I've got a concern with this going forward in the change use of bylaw. Basically, for the criteria that was used, I've read through the reports, and I keep questioning myself whether the criteria is the proper criteria for this sensitive type of area. I look at the special environment that it's in. It's at the point, it oversees the bay. I look at how sound travels on water and around water. I look at our life, our quality of life in Owen Sound, how we promote. I go to YouTube and Google Owen Sound, and they show videos of the wharf, of the dock area, of the sidewalk, and people strolling down it. And there's going to be open gravel, tall open gravel piles at the end of it. How that affects the fishermen that enjoy fishing off that side. I think the criteria that they've used to justify this isn't sensitive enough. So I look at what other points I could point to. Sometimes big box stores or chain restaurants move into areas, and they have a unique facade. And because of the area that they're in, they actually have to modify their facade to match the area that they're in. And I think this gravel pit and the proposed rough barriers and chain link fences and sound barriers that are going around it does not match the area that it's in. So that's my comments. I think the criteria needs to be more sensitive to the unique situation that it presents at the point there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. Any other members of the public would like to present this evening? Please. Good evening.
I'm Helen Marietta. I live halfway in between 17th and 18th Street. I'm not working now, but I have members in my home that does. And this here's 7 a.m. to 7 at night. People work night shifts down there too. We got kids that are going to school. The traffic is going to be, our kids are going to be in danger of these big trucks flying by. And I do know how they fly by. Plus, our roads are bad enough down there, let alone trucks every 15 to 20 minutes going down with big loads of gravel. I mean, the city needs to start thinking about this stuff. Like, we live in this area. And the dust and all the stuff that I hear here isn't going to be good for our health, let alone anything else. That's my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christina Milani, and I would just like to say a few points. Today, if we approve it, it's 6 barges that come in through May to September. And what if the industrial, and it gets going, and E.C. King says, oh, this is really wonderful, we're creating all these jobs, and it's not going to stay at 6 barges per year or per season. Once it's here, it's going to keep rolling. So I fear that, yes, we'll approve it today, but down the road, we're going to see a lot more traffic in that regard. And the other concern I have is, as the lady previously said, is that the traffic, these trucks are going to be going along 2nd Avenue and along, like it's all commercial down there. There's small businesses there. There's going to be these big trucks going back and forth, and those roads, they're not in any condition to even support that. And people traveling back and forth on that particular street on, I guess it's 1st Avenue or 2nd Avenue there. So 3rd. So in that regard, I have some concerns about the traffic. There's already lots of traffic on that road without the additional truckloads of gravel going back and forth. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Coulter.
Your Worship, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that we're getting addresses for our speakers so that we can continue to correspond with them. So if speakers could just give their address.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Welcome.
Hi there. Christy Hempel, 313 2nd Avenue East. I had a couple of questions for the planners, and I had a couple of images too. I don't know whether they're here or not. It's really quick. But my main question was whether this application precludes any of the mixed uses or the broad range of uses that in the past 20 years that I've been paying attention to the plans for this area, if it precludes any of that in any of the adjacent sites. So would sensitive receptors like housing now be precluded from anything in that big zone of impact?
Right now,
Your Worship, I think we would like to hear the comments tonight, and we would endeavor to get back when we write the report back to council.
Leave that as a question on the
Okay.
record, and staff will be able to prepare proper responses and report
It's
back to
kind
council.
of really an essential question, though, because if it precludes the land uses that we as a community have decided we want for this area, then it doesn't belong in a zoning amendment. It belongs in an official plan amendment where we look at big picture changes to our harbor front. So if we were going to decide that we didn't need sensitive noise levels, dust levels, ugliness, whatever, we were deciding that this is what we needed for our future, we would decide together and over the proper processes, right? We would have public meetings where we looked at our future. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. I didn't see anything that ever came out of any public meetings that said that we should have only industrial, and I'm concerned that this use does in fact preclude anything else because it impacts not just its own site. So it doesn't belong in a zoning amendment, it belongs in an official plan review or amendment. This is another one. All of these sites you can see up in the area where it is, it's always been a mix of residential, commercial, industrial, and harbor uses. Councillor Lemon, I think nobody disagrees that marine industrial uses is what we want. We're excited about it. But also nobody said that we should preclude anything else. It's never been something that people have wanted here. Here's the official plan. You've already seen it. The blue areas up there are indicating residential. I imagine that this development would mean that that could never happen. Is that correct?
We'll just leave that as an open-ended question,
Okay.
and staff will respond.
Okay. So in this case, you've got marine industrial. This is our official plan. We took a lot of time to put this together, the people, staff, council, consultants. On the left side, you see the marine industrial uses, but then you see snugged up next to it all the blue uses. That's mixed. And the mixed use is our broad goal. It's the one we all agreed on. So I'm not speaking for myself. I don't live here. I'm speaking for people who might live here in the future, which is what we're supposed to be planning for. This community vision was the most recent one. I'd like you to keep in mind the people of the community who came to the meeting to collaborate, to try to think ahead. We've had some urban design kind of attempts, and some are great, but all of them have some form of residential pretty close to that site, and certainly in the overall vision of the harbor alongside industrial. This is the site as it is now. The one thing that these plans don't have is that the status quo is what we want. We don't want that. We want it to be developed. We want it to be infilled. We want density. We want new residents, economic development strategy, supported mixed use. The economic development strategy actually had the maps in there that showed mixed use. I've seen some student work where they tackle it, and what they do is they start with the plans that we've already got. They look at them, they analyze them, and then sometimes students throw them out, but other times they try to work with them. I'm not seeing in this application any attempt to work with anything that we've ever done. Nothing. Zero. It's all been thrown out. It's like, I'm surprised. This is another student project. All of them have understood this requirement for mixed use and in their own way have come up with some sort of urban design. So I'm really interested that an urban design study was requested by the health unit, and in its wisdom, the planning decided that we didn't need one, and I'm just wondering, why don't we deserve a little bit of urban design? This is the area of impact. I guess one of the scenarios, probably one's a little bit less, but does this mean that this is the area of impact for all sensitive residences in the future and forevermore? And I don't remember any public process where we decided that that was what we were looking for. Anyways, thank you. I was brief.
You were very brief. Thank you. That's a lot of information. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment this evening?
Yeah, Ann Finley Stewart, at 430 8th Avenue A East. It just occurred to me that once this process is started, and it is a pilot project, and it probably would be forever after that, I remember when the public health building was built, and not without some discussion and debate in the public about the use of the cost of it and all of that sort of thing. And one of the big things that was said was that this building, with its LEED certification and its copper, shining copper and all of that sort of stuff, would be the centerpiece for the beginning of development, for the beginning of rejuvenation of the harbor. And it seems to me if you put a pile of gravel perpetually beside it, it can no longer be the centerpiece.
Thank you. There's a race to the podium, and I think you're going to win.
Dina Henry, 6th Ave East. I live right at the end of 6th Avenue East, and I've spent the last 3 summers listening to every concert, every word, verbatim almost, from concerts, announcers. It travels straight across the water, up the hill, right into my backyard and everybody else that lives in the environment that I live in. So I'm just hearing about the noise barriers and this and that, and I'm really kind of getting concerned that they're dealing with ground level noises, not noises that travel across the water and up the embankment and then across. And it's a little worrisome because during the summer months, rightly so, concerts are very much of value to a community. But if there's going to be four trucks or whatever for 7 or 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's a lot of noise. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mark Gavler.
Owen Sound has been talking about, working towards, thinking about developing the harbor as a tourist destination. We've been talking tourism for a lot of years about trying to make Owen Sound a people place, a place that's lovely to look at, and just when we're starting to get the harbor really looking nice, then this comes along. And it seems to me that this is in considerable conflict with all of our tourist ideas for the harbor. And we've also talked about some of the development that has happened, the health unit, and also on the other side of the harbor, the new medical clinic. And we have condominiums there. There have been plans and hopes for development of more town housing, condominiums, and so on. And this is going to change all of that. And of course, the noise and all of the disadvantages have been already talked about. But the other thought is the truck traffic into the city. I mean, our harbor is right in the middle of the city. It's downtown. Any trucks coming in have to come through residential areas. And it appalls me to think of the number of trucks, 12 hours a day, during the summer months when we have most tourist traffic and tourism, whether it's the Salmon Spectacular, whether it's Summer Folk, or all of the things that we have talked about bringing to Owen Sound. And I think this proposal is hugely detrimental to all of those ideas. I had one or two questions. For example, does such a proposal require an environmental assessment?
We'll just leave that out there as a question for the record.
Yeah. And I'm curious as to where is all this gravel coming from? Is this the only place that it can come to? Does it really have to come in that way? I also look at those two silos there and wonder, well, I wonder if that could hold they're already there, we've already lived with them for a long time, whether that could hold the gravel and be offloaded. I think that would be less intrusive than what we're talking about. So there are a lot of things to be considered, and I don't think this should be a hasty decision at all. I think that we need to look at all of the concerns and all of the questions and decide, and not just for the next 3 years, we need to look beyond that and what we want to do and plan out our thoughts for the harbor. And is this really the kind of use we want for our harbor? So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Just remind members of the public when they step forward if they could just mention their address as well as their name, please.
Good evening. My name is Sebastian Ostertag. I live on 4th Street East. Do you need the house number? It's 271. I have 3 questions and a comment. Firstly, when I looked at the proposal, there was a noise map. We saw that earlier in terms of the chart and with the intensity of noise. I'm wondering if there's a dust map. It's common for aggregate operations to have a dust map which will show the intensity of the dust and also the location that it would go. So I was wondering if we could have that at some point, whether or not that would affect the downtown or other areas of the city, because it's nowhere to be found on the application. The second question that I have is the health effects of the dust. Are there any known health effects for this type of aggregate? And is it only the clear type, or are there other types of aggregate? Because I recall in the proposal there were other types of aggregate that they mentioned. Now they mentioned clear tonight. I don't know what that means. Are there any? I mean, they're right here. Could they not answer if there's going to be any other types of aggregate?
Mr. Slocum, would you provide an answer on the clear aggregate, or will there be other types of aggregate stored on this site? Sure.
The clear stone has a lack of fines in it. It's just a clear stone product. The other part of the application included we call 7/8 or granular A, which contains the fines. That's the difference between the two types of aggregate, basically.
So it's not just A, it includes aggregate with fines? So then I'd ask, why was that not made clear in the presentation earlier? I mean, I don't know why they're trying to hide anything, but they could have just said we have clear and we have aggregate with fines. My third question is concerning the dust and the dust dampening. There's two different methods that I've read about for dampening dust, with water and with chemicals. And how would they dampen the dust at the site? I'm not sure if they want to answer it tonight or some other time.
We'll leave that as an open question for the future meeting.
The final part of my comments is a challenge to council to really to really have us go with their strong vision of what our waterfront's going to be, take a risk, and don't throw away the amazing planning that we've had. Look at the impacts of this project and how to affect the lives, just not of the citizens, but like what Christy Hempel said earlier today, the people that we want to attract to our community.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make comments, please? Welcome.
My name is Brenda Catcher. I live in the BDO building. Valuable tax dollars have been already spent building the health unit facility, landscaping its property, building in on the bay and landscaping its property, along with the landscaping by the Bayshore Community Center. This proposed gravel pit will spoil that. And one question I have is, what proposed employment opportunities would occur if the harbor is dredged, besides aggregate mining, grain handling, and road salt storage? What other employers would come here as a result of dredging the harbor and changing the use of it? As someone who works in precarious employment and attended the meeting at St. Andrew's Church 2 weeks ago, I understand the need to attract good employers. But I've also spoken with many people who have moved here to retire. Since the city wants to attract retirees with its website and all that, many people of whom have left bigger cities in order to come here to get away from all the noise and traffic. What can we do to address the needs of everyone? Which group of people pays the most taxes? The other problem I have too with in regards to the residential area, our property taxes are going to plummet. Who is going to buy our places if we need to sell them?
Thank you. Any?
Thank you very much. Drew Ferguson, 272 7th Street East, Owen Sound. I want to follow up on a couple of pieces. It's clear the proposal will significantly increase traffic in the area in the northeast sector of the city, 48 tractor-trailer loads over a 6-day day. However, no details of the truck route to the site have been provided, other than identifying a left turn at 2nd Avenue East onto 17th, and it should be noted that's not a 90-degree intersection, as is indicated in the Gamsby Manor Road Traffic Impact Study, file 213079. And the traffic study indicates no left turn is required, but the sharp angle of the turn, especially for tractor trailers, may require that design improvements. And that should be, I think, independently reviewed and assessed. The truck route has not been identified, and it may be the same issue applicable to the westbound tractor trailer traffic making right-hand turns off 10th Street East onto 2nd Avenue. That's a tight turn too. It's not a 90-degree turn. And these are not just, I understand, a single tractor trailer, but the tandem trailers, as I understand. So it's not just a truck, it's a truck and a trailer. With regard to some comments that city councilors have made earlier, I was a little disappointed perhaps, but that councilors would predispose to make comments. Particularly, I know this council is salivating at the thought of having their harbor dredged. But whether this would accommodate harbor dredging or not, I'm not sure. These barges are low draft. And it may be that the powers that be would state, well, you've got low draft craft in your harbor, you don't need your harbor dredged. Counterintuitive perhaps, but that may be the case. And I also wonder if the city has undertaken any sort of a cost-benefit analysis. You know, everything should be evaluated for not only the cost but the benefit that we receive. You know, maybe we'll get a job or two with someone unloading down by the harbor. Maybe it'll be more trucks, but maybe it'll be less trucks because, you know, trucks that would be making long hauls to Toronto are no longer required and they're making short hauls into Owen Sound instead. So maybe a cost-benefit analysis in that regard may be required as well. And I think the bigger picture of the future direction of growth along the harbor front really needs to be identified, as we've seen by a number of speakers here. And I think the city should honestly take the option available under the official plan that an urban design study be undertaken and to affirm the future direction of this development. I don't want to see this development close off any potential for future development of other residential, commercial, et cetera, along that waterfront. And also being an employee of the health unit, I'm certainly concerned that it not be, that it's being misconstrued. And I really do believe because of the, you know, things such as the Well Baby program, the speech and infant child hearing and speech and language program, the clinical services including sexual health and harm reduction programs, sexually transmitted disease, illness testing, and caseload contact management. And I go on with the list of programs that this really is, in fact, a sensitive receptor and should be treated as a sensitive receptor. And if the project either should accommodate that either by mitigation or in its official plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Jason Hemstock, and I'm here representing Best Western Inn on the Bay. That's 1800 2nd Avenue East. Being a neighboring property, I do have concerns over dust, noise, and traffic, but I'd like to speak specifically to noise. I have a genuine concern over noise for the hotel property, specifically for outdoor activity, namely ceremonies for weddings. We're quite a popular location, as is the Bayshore Arena for wedding ceremonies overlooking the water. My concern is the noise levels being at 90% of capacity, and as Andrew had stated, having variable in those estimates. How nice would a ceremony be next to industrial sites with heavy equipment? That's mainly my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who'd like to provide comments tonight on this? One more call. Any other members of the public that would like to comment on this here tonight?
Can I ask a really simple question?
Please come up to the podium and ask away.
It's probably really simple, but I'm just wondering if the reverse indicators on the trucks backing up is considered in this decibel levels, because I know I hear the snowplow reverse trucks at 4 in the morning, and sometimes I phone the city about it, but is that in this study as well? They're very high-pitched and they're very loud, and I know there's a lot of backing up going on. You know that sound?
Oh,
Yeah.
very well.
I didn't know if it was in the study. It's in the study. Oh, okay. So they're not included in this level? So
Well, that is something that we'll have a staff report back on, and in fact, I'm just going to go over sort of the next steps in this process.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Essentially, one more time, is there any member of the public who would like to ask a question or make a comment on this issue tonight? Seeing none, just an overview before I close the public meeting. The next steps essentially are this. There will be agency comments provided for review and analysis. The agency comments in the technical report are comments made during the pre-circulation stage of the application. The city will be reviewing and peer reviews of technical reports and comments received tonight will be part of the report. This staff report will come back to council, and at that point, site plan approval and agreement would be required, and the process will go from there. So in the short term, all of your comments that we have heard this evening are going to be taken into consideration when staff writes the staff report and their recommendations back to council, as well as any technical reports that have been provided will go through a peer review process, and it will be a very robust process, I can assure you, and it will all come back to council in due time. I'll move that the public meeting is now closed. Could I have a motion to reconvene council, please? Moved by Councillor Twaddle. All those in favor? Thank you. And now I will give you about 2 minutes to, those of you that want to clear out.
Your worship.
Yes.
If I may remind anybody from the public, this public meeting hasn't signed the sign-in sheet. I have it. If you want to be in contact and get information back and follow up from the reports, please do so. I encourage you to sign it. Thank you.
If I could maybe just suggest that list go to the outside table. Thank you. And the president of AMO is here somewhere, and Mr. Powers, and he has a long drive ahead of him after he addresses us here this evening. Maybe we've lost him. Okay, yeah, there we go. Mr. Powers, thank you very much for your patience, and you're certainly well versed in the ways of the municipal sector and public meetings. And
I've had a few years. I've had a few years of experience at that, Madam Mayor, and that. So first off, to the ladies and gentlemen of Owen Sound City Council, I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation on behalf of your mayor. I had a wonderful opportunity earlier on to have somewhat of a tour and an introduction to Owen Sound through your mayor and through your city manager, and I thank you for taking your time to show me around this wonderful community. I know it somewhat, whereas my family has on my late wife's side of the family, they have a cottage up at Lion's Head, so we too often we pass by, but sometimes we make the trip into Owen Sound, and I tell you, it's worth coming into here. So I'm not going to prolong your meeting in that, but once again, thank you for the invitation to come up. It's indeed my pleasure to be here on behalf of the 43 members of the Board of Directors of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. We represent 443 municipalities in this province. We don't have Toronto in our membership, so sometimes there are some good things that come from the organization. So very briefly, I'm going to touch on a couple of these issues. I know you have still yet a busy agenda for the balance of the evening. So before you is things that I'm going to touch on. I'm going to touch on 3 of those, and with your indulgence, I'll move to the first one. Every municipality, certainly within the country and in all the municipalities in Ontario, benefit from 2 sleeves of funding. One of them has been the federal gas tax, which was ultimately made permanent, and where 5 cents from every liter of gas tax finds its way back to the municipalities, and it's done on a distribution by per capita basis, and it's one of those deemed sustainable flows. Too often, us and our organizations are, we get money for capitals, but never get any money for operating, and seldom do we get a sustainable funding flow. And this started back in 2005 and ultimately has been permanent. Just recently we signed, so it's in the case of Ontario, and we're a very, very unique organization and operation between the provinces and territories. Only in Ontario does the municipal association administer the money on behalf of the federal government. The money doesn't flow at all to the provincial government. It automatically finds its way to AMO, and we in turn cut the checks. We're the ones that ask for the reports. The city manager and her staff produces the reports and gets them back in a timely manner, so we in turn control the monies back to you. I have colleagues in the province of Quebec on that who don't see the money. It finds its way to the province, doesn't find its way in the municipalities. The province determines what's good for the municipalities, and then as such uses that federal gas tax. And New Brunswick's the same way. 60% of the funding finds its way back to the municipalities, and the balance is held by the province for, how should we say, pet projects on an ad-needed basis. We just signed the first renewal of the agreement, so we've signed a 5-year renewal, and we bargained very strongly on your behalf. There was elements in the first agreement that was kind of a testing ground, things that we thought would work well, but kind of from the very beginning we thought it might be a pilot project and we would learn from it. And as a result, we did that. So there's actually designs in the projects in the federal gas tax. There are a lot more eligible projects. At one time there was only 6 categories. Now there's multiple projects there. But hand in glove with that is the move towards the province and ultimately the federal government insisting upon asset management plans. Too often municipalities would, I mean, the classic story of a provincial minister told me, he says, you know, I had this municipality came to me and begging and saying was, you know, we need you to come up with money in order to build, put a second skating rink on our arena and things like that. So he went out and he had conversations with his colleagues and that and got the money to get the second rink. The next year they were back and said, we need a major improvement on our sewer water. Excuse me, where are your priorities? As far as I'm concerned, the provision of copious amounts of safe drinkable water. So as a result, because of these too many examples of a lack of priority setting, the provincial government and now the federal government will require asset management plans in order for you to be eligible to apply for grants, either from federal or provincial governments. So the movement, we started with $90 million of the province. There's additional monies have flown through to assist all municipalities of varying sizes to ensure that they have asset management plans which will help to define the priorities of your municipality for years to come and also assist the government in making wise decisions to direct the dollars that they have. And as a result, we've increased the number of categories that are available under the federal gas tax. The administration, it's much more streamlined from the standpoint. Before it was very, very report heavy. Now the details are there, there's online reporting, and as a result we'll be able to respond to the government and the governments in a meaningful way. The communications, this is one thing that's certainly been lacking, and all municipalities are to blame, is just remember the federal government has made a commitment to redirect money. I come from the city of Hamilton. We benefit to the tune of $34 million a year in federal gas tax. I mean, that's not chump change, ladies and gentlemen, and as a result, we should be thanking the federal government for their commitment of a permanency and a redirection of their funds. So part of the agreement is, you know, if you invest their money back into your municipality, you're going to have to give the appropriate recognition and thanks and be part of it, as we should in the first case. And the final thing is that we sent out very shortly, within the last month or so, agreements to every one of the municipalities. You're going to be required to pass a bylaw to indicate that you're going to want to be part of this process, return them back, because we'd like to be in a position to cut the first checks and get them out to you by the 1st of July. So, Madam Deputy Clerk and City Manager, if you haven't got it in place yet, I urge you to do it so that they're there, so that we can cut your checks. I'll be more than happy to put my signature to your checks and maybe even deliver it in person again. But the second thing is the other fund, and we were involved in negotiations from day one. Because we're deemed a partner, it's just not the province, just not the federal government. As I said, it's a very unique situation. The Association of Municipalities and the City of Toronto, the province and the federal government were all equal partners here in Ontario under the process. And as a result, we were all involved in the negotiations. So what we've ended up was a much more streamlined and effective and beneficial programs for all of us. The second program that I have here is the Building Canada Fund. And this was something we were moving forward on negotiations in a meaningful way, and then something happened about 2 weeks ago, and which kind of delays everything now till about the 12th of June. So we'll get back to the table on the 12th of June so that we can hammer out the Building Canada fund, so that additional funds can find their ways to your municipalities from a different funding sleeve. So keep in track with that particular thing. The next thing, and then instant involvement, is it's funny, sometimes you end up with very questionable bedmates, and this was one here. Prompt Payment Act, Bill 69, was a private member's bill that was introduced by a member of the legislature, and what it was meant to do was to basically speed up the payment of bills. If there was a demand for a payment of a bill, it had to be paid within 10 days. Everything that we've negotiated over the years, every one of the municipalities has in place with regards to construction liens, from the standpoint of performance payment for payment and those things, we're going to go out the way of the window. We, on behalf of you, made the presentations, and we ended up with some very strange bedmates. Some of the unions kind of at first review looked at this and thought, geez, this is a pretty good little piece of legislation. But when they actually drilled down to it and we had some conversation, there was a single union that was supportive of the private members bill, and then that one came full circle, and as a result there was not a single proponent for the bill. And what's happened here was the bill was not reported out, which is very, very unusual. When a private member bill actually finds its way to committee, usually they will report out. They'll make amendments to the piece of legislation or indicate, send it back and make these changes. The decision made was no report out. They weren't in favor of it moving any further, and basically it's died until it either finds its way in a new life when the new legislature reconvenes, or in our case, we hope that it's dead forever and never sees the day again. But what the government did as a response is they've made an announcement that they're going to review the Construction Liens Act. So there may very well be implications. We're thinking the implications may very well be helpful to us in all of our municipalities to assist us, because we're some of the largest infrastructure investors throughout the province and we need to work hand in hand with the contractors, yet they have a responsibility in us to deliver the products that are in place. Joint and several liability is something that all of you are impacted by. There's a rule that's called the 1% rule. Every time there's a claim made against a municipality or for anything, whether it's a roadway or a sidewalk or a playground or a toboggan hill or whatever the case is, the solicitors for the complainant, the plaintiff, will always add in this 1% rule. So there's always this thing, there's a possibility that a municipality may be found responsible for 1% of the claims. You know, maybe the sign that had been put up a number of years ago was no longer as clear. Maybe it had fallen, not been replaced, and that. So it was a liability to the municipalities. But what's happened too often is what's called, it's the deep pocket syndrome. So in other words, a decision has been made against somebody, and they go to make the claims against those individuals and find that they have insufficient revenues to satisfy the claim. Who do they go back to? They go back to us, who they deem to have deep pockets. Hey, we can raise the money, we'll just tax our residents in order to pay the difference. So this is something that we've been pushing in a major way. I've spent a lot of time down in Toronto working with the ministry, and in fact we actually had a draft piece of legislation that we certainly could buy into. There was modifications made to it. It was a piece of legislation that was beneficial, but once again, something came along and it's delayed now until June the 12th, but it's certainly not something that we're going to let slip by the wayside. You've asked us to direct our attentions to it, and we're going to continue to do it. So in conclusion, and I'll answer any questions or try to or avoid any questions that you may raise to me. AMO's not a head office, you know, even though we are a house in downtown Toronto, which is very close to Queen's Park, because that's where we do our business with the legislative staff and up at Queen's Park. Even though we have a building, we're not a thing, and we're not a head office, we're a meeting place. As I indicated, my board of directors is made up of 43 individuals from all corners of this particular project, representing all the interests and sectors of this municipalities, whether it's counties, hamlets, towns, villages, cities, such as, my city. And when our board makes a decision, we've considered every aspect and representing all the interests of this province. We thank you for your continued support. Mayor Haswell, I want to thank you on behalf of us for your past involvement as a member of the board of directors, the Association of Municipalities, and we thank you for that. So unless you need to move on, I'll be prepared to try to answer any questions. I was a former member of Parliament, so in the afternoon we had question period. Remember, it's called question period. It's not called answer period. So.
Well, thank you very much for coming here this evening and for bringing us up to date on some really key issues that not only face Owen Sound, but face all of municipalities across Ontario. I am looking around council, and I'm wondering if any member of council has a question for Mr. Powers this evening. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for coming, Mr. Powers. A question on the OMPF funding.
Yes.
In our particular case, we've been cut back considerably year after year. It doesn't look like that's going to get any better anytime soon. I'm just wondering your take on that, your discussions with government officials on that. Where do you see it heading?
We've been consistent. We know it was heading to a cap of $500 million. So as you know, over a period of time, the number of municipalities, not every municipality in the province benefits from OMPF funding. It was heading towards the $500 million cap. There was two reductions that were made, once this year in the amount of $25 million and $25 million next year. We asked the province to please defer any of those reductions until things turn around. Between that and, as you're aware, there's the issue about the OPP billing situation for those municipalities that have OPP billing. The feeling was there would be, double hits from there. It appears certainly in the movement towards balancing the provincial budget, there hasn't been a willingness on the part of the current government in order to, I'm going to take a pause on the OMPF. We continue to raise it with them every time we have. 2 weeks ago, I was up in northwestern Ontario, and the Premier was speaking, and she started talking about OMPF. She stopped for a second, and she looked right at me, and she says, yeah, I know exactly what you're thinking in that. And so we'll be consistent and push the issue in that. I can't give you a definitive answer, but it'll certainly still be on our blueprints and our plan of action going forward.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the questions that I have is cities like Owen Sound. At one time, we used to have 3 trains a day CN and 3 trains a day CPR, and we had a vibrant bus service. And now we're down to minimal service via Barrie. You can't go straight down to Toronto. And we're not the only municipality in Ontario that is suffering from this lack of the ability for people to have mobility outside their communities. And it's really something that affects the quality of life in many, many municipalities off the 400 corridors. And has AMO ever talked to the province about that there's other places that need transit than Toronto, the Golden Horseshoe, with all due respect? I mean, we hear, well, we're expanding the GO service. That's nice, but if I want to get a GO train, I think I have to go to Barrie to get it, or perhaps Guelph. I don't know whether it even runs to Guelph now, or Orangeville.
It does, yes.
Yeah. But we're north of that, and we're the forgotten part of Ontario in terms of the province ever looking at where people still live. I mean, we still have people here who would like to go to other places. And right now, it's virtually impossible. And I really feel that I would like to see AMO start to consider all the municipalities, Because this problem is facing most municipalities in Grey County, Bruce County, Huron County, and I'm sure quite a few others.
So let me preface my remark is that the issue of transportation exclusive, the issue of train exclusive of the GO Transit system falls under the federal jurisdiction. So whether it's CPCN or that falls under the federal jurisdiction where the routing is and the operations that are associated with it. The province has announced $29 billion investment in infrastructure funding, of which $14 billion is slated for outside of the greater Hamilton-Toronto area. Ours is meant to help to deal with the gridlock, the traffic gridlock that's apparent in our particular area. However, part of that money is to identify, just exactly as you said, Councillor, is the issue about the transportation linkages, whether it's regional linkages or whatever, whether it's increased bus service or other alternatives. So that's part of the monies that are directed as part of that, and along with that is the studies that will come from that. We discussed it. It's been on the agenda for AMO for a while. So as you said, we've stayed out of the trains because it's not our bailiwick, but all other options are things that are being considered, and we dialogue with the various ministries with regards to that. And it's an issue that's brought to us frequently, not only by yourselves, but I refer to the parts of Ontario as the south, the near north, and the north, and they have varying challenges, and that's something that's on our agenda, and we're bringing that up with the various ministries.
I'm very pleased with that, and if there's going to be hearings on that, this Owen Sound would be a wonderful location, because we have people here. For instance, I was talking to someone who has to go to Kitchener for some hospital treatment, and to get to Kitchener from Owen Sound, you go to Barrie, go to Toronto, then back to Kitchener. It's not really a direct route.
I've made the note, sir.
Councillor Wright and then Councillor Boddy.
Thank you very much, and it's nice to have you come up to visit us.
Thank you.
This is a question about the size of the city. We are roughly 22,000 people, and we're too small for some grants, and we're too large for other grants. We seem to fall in the middle and fall through the cracks. My concern is the policing costs. There is a grant that in the County of Grey, 8 municipalities receive for policing, but Owen Sound doesn't. The reason we don't is because we're considered too big. Now, the town of Blue Mountains, which has a higher assessment than Owen Sound has, they get the policing grant. So I'm hoping that when AMO works with the Ministry of Finance to revamp some of these charges, that you'll really push that consideration that we be extended that policing grant the same as our neighbors.
One of the things that we're currently looking in, we just finished completing a report on the OPP billing situation. As you're aware, the OPP came up with a single proposal for a new billing model for them. Needless to say, it created winners and losers from the municipalities. It was something for us hard to stomach. So we established a working group made up of the very disparate groups in order to consider the issue. We came up with some recommendations. One of them clearly involves, no matter what you do, requires mitigations for the for the winners. In other words, the phasing in over a period of time to get to the point where they should be. But really, the core impact on the whole thing was the realization of controlling the costs associated with the provision of emergency services and the policing cost. And one of the things that we've struck is an independent committee that's a growth out of the OPP committee that will look at things such as grants and the provisions of elements of policing services and that can be done by other individuals or other groups to provide that. So I think when we rationalize or get control of the cost, then we have justification to go back to them and ask for funding. So what you've said is certainly not something that's lost. And it was part of our discussions and will be part of our ensuing discussions. So thank you for bringing it to us.
And just to follow up on that, in the county, of the 9 municipalities, 3 are municipal policing and 6 are OPP. So it needs to affect all municipal policing and OPP. I mean, we all should be treated the same.
I certainly hope.
So I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I mean,
Yeah.
Coming from the city of Hamilton, we have our own police force. So I mean, we get no grants at all towards
No.
it. Our budget is $261 million for policing services in the city of Hamilton, and of which it's all funded by the taxpayers.
It's pretty costly.
Yes, ma'am.
Councillor Boddy?
I may not be too far off the same topic. I wanted to ask about AMO's success or future plans with regard to essential service arbitration. You know, here on fire and police, we're paying about 45% of our budget is going to those two things. And again, just like you, coming from our tax base, except unlike the big boys in Hamilton that have X percentage of growth every year, or Mississauga, where we've got 1%, this is killing us, and it's killing Brockville, it's killing a lot of small towns. You're getting it all the time. Is there some movement going to happen with any of those parties down there? How are you making out trying to get this system fixed?
Well, we've had 5 kicks at the can over the last 2 years, and I regretfully must advise that there's been no willingness on the part of the other 2 providers of the providers of service in order to make a change. The suggestion that we made was one that did not determine a predetermination. What it did was it asked for a more transparent and accountable process that required the arbitrator to take into consideration both the financial and the quality of life, health of the communities that are doing, take into consideration the settlements that have already been achieved through voluntary settlements among like unions within the particular community. It's not something that's going to go away, certainly from our perspective, and in fact, just prior to the government dissolving, I had face-to-face meetings with the new Minister of Labour and just basically told him it's not going away. It will be on the agenda until it's sorted out. Once again, emphatically, there was no predetermined outcome. All we asked for was a fairness and accountability, and the arbitrators to, when they rendered their decision, to take into consideration of the financial health and quality of life in the community that they were rendering a decision on.
Thank you very much. Any other members of council? New questions? Seeing none, I want to thank you on behalf of council and our municipal colleagues in the area. Mr. Powers, you've done a terrific job in your tenure, which is coming to a close in August, I know. And I thank you on behalf of municipalities for your strong advocacy and your support over the years in terms of getting our voice heard, particularly at Queen's Park.
And I thank you for your continued support, and I invite you to London in August on that to see that I'm definitely gone at that particular point as I retire from my position as president. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you very much. Safe trip. Councillor Lemon, you'll be excited to talk to me later on about a meeting I attended this afternoon in beautiful downtown Solway. There's a geographic challenge for you. Where is Solway? It's just outside of Walkerton. And there was a good meeting today of the Grey Bruce Poverty Task Force, of which I am on the Regional Transportation Committee. The County of Grey is hiring, well, as of tomorrow, will be hiring a transportation specialist to look at all of the regional transportation services that are in Grey and Bruce counties, creating a network to knit them all together. So both specialized transit and conventional transit systems. And the report will be coming back to County Council in September of this year. So it's a fairly tight turnaround. And this is a county initiative springing out of the Grey Bruce Poverty Task Force. Councillor Lemon.
That's one area I haven't heard about down by Walkerton. You got me on that one. But do you know where Aberdeen is?
No.
It's near there.
Okay.
Anyway, my one question deals with persons with health concerns. And are you going to be looking at that as part of the integrated, because there are people who have to go for treatment?
Yes, non-medical emergencies as well as social visits. There's often people who just want to go to London to visit a relative. And there are quite a number of services in Grey and Bruce counties, and yet they're all operating in isolation. Part of the mandate of this consultant's report is to provide a vehicle to knit all of these isolated transit systems together. And that could take on any form, but you'll be keenly interested as we move forward with this.
I'm very supportive.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving along. We have another deputation sitting in the front row center. We have John Harrison. Welcome, Mr. Harrison, President of Grey Bruce Cultural Network and the North Bruce Grey Owen Sound branch of the Architectural Conservancy, Ontario. And you're here to talk to us about things that we love.
Actually, the birthplace of your very function.
There we go.
Wouldn't be here today.
Now, Mr. Harrison, I know how you love this topic, and I know that you could go on far more than 10 minutes, but I'm going to beg your indulgence. 10 minutes. Thank you, sir.
You have received
Yes.
formally at the previous council meeting where I was present and this letter was presented. You've received the letter, and for the members of the media, I have copies for you tonight. The Grey Bruce Cultural Network is the current iteration of an umbrella organization for the cultural groups, both arts and heritage, in Grey and Bruce counties. In the mid-1980s, when the then city council sold the courthouse to a developer, and the developer's check bounced, Hansel Barda, Margaret Gavler, and I and others formed a committee to save the courthouse and negotiated a head lease, and we then sublet the property to artists and arts organizations, heritage groups, musicians, craftspeople, and so on. And the building operated quite successfully for the first 10 years of that process. As I've outlined in here, unfortunately, the Grey Bruce Arts Council had a staff member who caused financial difficulties to the degree that the Arts Council declared bankruptcy in 1994. But the city has maintained that function of the old courthouse arts building. And that building has artists and craftsmen and musicians in it today as tenants. That function has been there for 30 years now, and the sign, if we can scroll through to the end of this letter, I guess you've got the whole thing as a PDF, you'll see, can you go right through to the end? The second last page, page 6 or 7, 6 and 7, I think. So there it is, the courthouse and the sign that signals that that operation is still the operation of the courthouse. So when we heard about the surplus and disposal process, we contacted Steve Furness and the city and the clerk's office and so on, and began to see what the process was about and where you were going with this. We also met with a number of tenants in the building, and we have a formal meeting with the tenants tomorrow in the early afternoon period. So there's a process underway, and the point of the letter, and you've all read it, but for those who aren't here, the point of the letter is that there was an agreement with the city back in the mid-'80s. We got the building designated. This city invested $100,000 into stabilizing the roof truss structure and re-roofing the building. We had produced a plan in the 70s for performing arts facilities in the town, and back then the courthouse was identified. Oh, you're very welcome. That's fine, thank you. The courthouse and the courtroom was identified as one of the 2 top priorities for performing arts space of different scales, and the courtroom still will provide a studio theater and chamber music facility that is smaller than the Roxy Division, or Georgian Shores United Church, the other OSCVI auditorium, the other large auditoriums that we have. But we have music and music programs where this is appropriate. And yes, we have Harmony Place. And the Harmony Center is a wonderful addition. We've had discussions with the board of Harmony Center, and we don't see we don't see a conflict with what we're proposing for this area. Similarly, we'll be having discussions with the Roxy because the Roxy and the theater groups in town don't have a small studio theater like presentation space for many other kinds of theatrical presentation. In any event, it's the belief of the cultural network and the many partners that we're assembling for this, that in fact the courthouse, as the old Courthouse Arts Center, as a center for culture and heritage, is now part of the heritage of that building. And there is every indicator of not only the current need continuing, but an expanded need once again that would once again fill that building. The plan, your developer's information package contains numerous pages from an architectural study by Christopher Borgel. And he, like we are members of the Provincial Council of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. We've outlined that the Conservancy, through our South Bruce Grey branch, purchased Walkerton's Victoria Jubilee Hall, raised the grants and other funding to do the restoration work, leased that out, and the second floor auditorium, nice parallel, was restored and is now used for all kinds of meetings and music and theater presentations. So we're ready to go, and we are really here to say we urge Council to recognize its historic and continuing interests in what has been going on and responsibilities regarding that. We're here to help you solve the issue of disposal of the building, but in a way that's consistent with all of the cultural planning that's gone on and its historic use. And we have the partners here in place to do that. We are looking at, with the jail property, significant redevelopment with the jail building and the jail courtyards and the larger jail landscape area. And we have discussions underway. I had a discussion with the partner interested in the jail component of things, and they're saying they're happy, they love the site. What's the next step? So the next step, as far as we're concerned, and that is our real request here with you tonight, is to agree to enter into negotiations with us so that we may speak with the planning department and the other departments of the city that we need to in order to refine from the concept plan we have now into more detail and be able to present you with detail in the near future.
You still have 5 minutes.
I promised. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm delighted.
I mean,
Thank you.
last time I was here, a year or so ago.
Yes.
Yeah, I surprised you then too.
And you are full of surprises, Mr. Harrison. Thank you. Councillor Twaddle.
Well, thank you, Mr. Harrison. I think it's fair to say that we welcome all the help we can get.
Okay.
On this issue particularly, it's been a head scratcher for a long time. I wonder if you could just provide a little bit more information about who makes up the Grey Bruce Cultural Network?
Yes, we have a board of directors now of 3. We've gone through a period where other directors of my generation have found their lives changing and they've moved on. I have negotiations underway and have for almost a year with a wide range of the next generation, younger generation, cultural leaders and cultural managers. As you may know, there are more and more cultural organizations in the community that are now employing trained cultural managers. And that's a very positive development for this community. We have a slate coming on board, and the Grey Bruce Cultural Network is somewhat unique in that we have negotiated with government, and we don't conduct an annual general meeting. We can conduct over the internet an annual general process, which is an approved process. And we are preparing to bring this slate of new directors on board and conduct the annual general process, and that will put the cultural network back into full operating mode. The network operates a website that is a calendar and listing website. It has been around for some time. It needs significant renewal because of developments in technology since then, and our ability to use the internet now and social media as the prime meeting ground for all of the members, art side and heritage side. We are setting up a whole new program in that respect as well. So essentially the cultural network is going through renewal. Joan Chandler is a director currently, and Mary Diane Carroll and myself.
Okay, and so you are incorporated?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the organization has just been humming through this renewal process, which has taken longer than we'd anticipated for a number of reasons.
So at this point, you're not quite ready to start a discussion? You don't have a new
No,
board?
the board that's in place is perfectly capable of carrying on business at this point.
So in your letters of incorporation, how many board members do you require?
Yes, we meet the requirement.
You meet that, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of council have a question? Well, I thank you so much for your presentation, for your question this evening. We do have, the bylaw is on tonight.
Yes.
That if the bylaw passes, it would declare the former jail and the old courthouse as surplus to the needs of the city of Owen Sound, which in any event would have to occur before any discussions could happen with any new organization. So we're really in stepping with many of us around this table are very, very committed to seeing an adaptive reuse of this particular building.
Right.
And that should give some comfort to both yourself and to a number of the members of your organization. That is going to be the first thought of any proposal that comes across our desks.
And I think if you recognize that we created an adaptive reuse quite successfully 30 years ago, and that has continued. And we're talking now about, and I say that because Marg and I were part of the Greybush Arts Council, which was in existence then. And created
And
that.
it has certainly served an incredible service.
It has, and it has a huge potential now, because it's not full as it is now, but it could easily be again. And I should say that I've had a tour of the jail. The tenants have had tours of the jail, and we're all convinced that those spaces are quite readily adapted for studio uses and other related uses, and we look forward to working with that building, complex as it is. There's certainly a lot of work to be done, but we've all invested over the years. I was speaking with Judy Juniper, and Judy and Glenn are part of the North Bruce Grey on Sound branch of the Architectural Conservancy, for example. And they got free paint from Para Paint when we redeveloped the building. They were in there scraping and cleaning. I was part of getting old doors, fire-rated doors, out of the old hospital so that we could bring the building up to fire standards so we could occupy it in the mid-'80s. And we all put a lot of time and sweat and effort and money as well into it. And it has a tradition, and the tradition is a sound one to build upon now. And we know from our experience in other projects that the government interest, given that cultural tourism is the biggest growth industry in the tourism sector, and that tourism is one of the biggest economic development resources, potentials that we have here, this site, redeveloped as our concept illustrates, I think you'll agree when you see that, has a wonderful, dynamic, additional power as we carry this project forward. So the only other thing I would emphasize again, because of the continuing cultural connection and use, we're asking that we be able to begin negotiations now with city staff, your development team, toward the answering all their questions, but refining and developing the project as quickly as we can in the interest of the best, highest and best use of the building at this point.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and certainly the wheels will be set in motion for the bylaw very shortly. Yeah. Is there any member of council with a question? Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I'd just like to thank you, John, on behalf of all of us, for that work over those 30 years and for bringing it forward again, because this is a group that we do want to honor the volunteer work that's done in this community, and it's very nice that you reminded us of all that work.
Well, thank you very much, Council and Mayor Haswell and staff, for receiving the letter and hearing what we've had to say, and we're always available for any questions you may have. Thank you again.
We're certainly all rowing in the same direction. We're just taking interesting routes to get there, but we're all rowing in the same way. Thank you. And now our patient chair of the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library and our chief librarian administrator, Tim Nichols-Harrison and Richard Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you. I'll just find my
Sure.
presentation here. Where is play on this thing? It's not a Mac, you know, so I have a little trouble.
Is it a little clunkier than a Mac,
Yeah,
perhaps?
I just need play. Great. Thanks, Your Worship, members of council. Thanks for the invitation. I was going to jokingly ask if I could have John's 5 extra minutes for my presentation, but I do want to get home for the third period of the Canadiens-Boston game if possible. Last check, it was 1-0 for the Canadiens, if anyone's interested. So, in any case, onwards and upwards. Thanks for having me here tonight. There's been lots going on at the library over the past couple of months, not the least of which was the departure of our former CEO, Cindy Weir, and the hiring of our new CEO, Tim Nichols-Harrison, who's here with me tonight. And lots of other stuff going on. Thanks, Tim, and I'm going to have questions, I'm sure. Other things that we've been doing, we've issued an invitation to Grey County Libraries to join the Ontario Library Consortium. We have requested County Council to fund the Ontario Library Consortium memberships for these libraries. We've put forward a resolution to set up a meeting with the Meaford Public Library Board, and of course you've heard a little bit about our non-resident user fees, so I'll talk about those first. The original non-resident user fee for the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library for a family of 4 was last visited in 1994. That's when that rate of $160 for a family of 4 was set. A lack of change during the intervening years has put the members of our union in the position of subsidizing these non-member memberships. We have recognized that that's been an issue over the years, and in 2011 the board voted to increase the fee to $200 per family, but that fee was never implemented because the board decided that the issue needed further study. Nobody was quite satisfied with the $200 because it didn't come close enough to addressing the issue that we had. So just to review, the cost per card-carrying library user for each of our member municipalities and our contracting municipalities ranges from $105 per user to $114.50. So the average cost per user of the library is $110.75. At the non-resident user fee of $160, that meant that the members of the union were subsidizing non-residents at a rate of approximately $283 per family. So they were getting a great deal. They were not paying what the rest of us pay for library service. The other problem with that is the non-resident fee did leave the members of the union library in a vulnerable position in the event that perhaps one of the members decided that they were going to leave the union and perhaps go to a non-resident user pay system instead. Then how grand does the subsidy that the union members provide become? So to deal with this issue, at its March 24th meeting, the Library Board passed the following resolution, which was aimed at bringing this in line, that the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library immediately increases the non-member user fee to $500 per family, and that seasonal memberships be increased to $80 per family for 2 months or $30 per individual, and that all other special membership categories for library service remain in place. And those categories include, for example, free membership to students at Georgian College who are from OA. It's important to note that this motion has no impact on present members or contracting municipalities to the union. No impact at all. It does, however, remove the possibility that if a municipality were to leave the union, The remaining members would end up subsidizing their membership. The real impact of this motion was on fewer than 24 non-resident members presently at the library, and at our April meeting, we passed a resolution that the library board grandparents those current up-to-date non-resident members to the previous annual fee of $160 in recognition of their longtime support as non-resident users of the library. Integration and cooperation has been another issue, and of course at your April 14th meeting, Council supported a motion from the municipality of Meaford seeking greater cooperation and integration of library services. So at our last meeting, we passed a motion that the Library Board invite the Meaford Public Library Board to a meeting facilitated by the Southern Ontario Library Service to discuss possibilities for the creation of a library service to serve all of the residents of North Grey. And of course, the county library has been an issue of a lot of discussion lately as well. And so as we got discussing it, again, I was at your last meeting and heard some of the discussion, and we passed a couple of motions. The county has chosen not to pursue a county-wide library system at this point. But one of the issues, the biggest issues that was standing in the way is the fact that all of the libraries in the county use a different integrated library system, so a system of managing their materials. So we put forward a motion, moved by Councillor Chamberlain, that the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library invites all Grey County libraries to apply for associate memberships in the Ontario Library Consortium through our library so that we can all then take advantage of the same integrated library system. And the consortium is a group of 20-odd libraries from around the province who get together to buy and license for this management software, which is moderately expensive. And then further to that resolution, we passed a motion that came from Councillor Adair that the library asks the county to fund the licensing fee to all of the libraries in the county to belong to the consortium so that, again, we can bring everybody in line. And it gives the county a way to participate in the potential of a future that might include a county library, because this really is the first step that has to be taken. And it gives everyone the opportunity to participate if, in fact, the county wants to go in that direction. And so that is my presentation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah. And I also wanted to take an opportunity to thank you for your years of volunteerism as library board chair and library board member over the years. I know you put an awful lot of time and energy into it, and it's greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Richard. What would it cost the county of Grey to have the ILS system all over Grey County? Do you have any idea of the cost?
We're presently investigating that. I can tell you that our library pays a $25,000 licensing fee per year. Now, I don't know, that may be based on size of collection, and again, we are currently looking into what those costs might be.
So you'll be able to tell the county at the time you go to them that
if they're interested in hearing.
This is what the real cost.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other members of council have any questions? I have one question, and that is with regards to accreditation. And yes. What does that mean when a library, so many libraries in Ontario are accredited? Owen Sound, North Grey Union Public Library, I understand, is not accredited.
Right. Accreditation is fairly new.
Sure. What's the value?
Well, I think that what it does is it sets a certain standard that everybody lives up to in their libraries. It's quite a comprehensive process that you have to go through. And in fact, we did start working towards accreditation a number of years ago. And at that time, there was so much change and it was coming so fast and furious, the board decided to step back from accreditation. It still is on our books as something we might like to pursue. But given the amount of staff time involved, we stepped back from it. But it just sets a standard that all libraries that are accredited will live up to. I mean, in the same way that a hospital is accredited, they have to meet certain standards.
So it doesn't have an impact positively or negatively on funding source?
There's no financial impact at all.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for that. Okay. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the board is asking the county to to do. And I really think the county went through the whole motions of looking at a county-wide library system, and that didn't go anywhere. We're one of the few counties that doesn't actually have a county system. One of the impediments, there were several, but one of them was the fact that all of the libraries use a different management system for checking in books, checking out books, knowing what books you have, all of that. The integrated library system, it's really an inventory system. So it's difficult to sort of cooperate from library to library because you're using different systems. I think the county needs to serve a role, and has a role to play here, and that is at the very minimum encouraging through covering the cost of membership, of getting everybody in the county, all the libraries, on the same system. The North Grey Union Library and the Bruce County Library system are on the same system because we both belong to the Ontario Library Consortium along with 20 other libraries throughout the province. None of the other smaller libraries in Grey County are on the system. It would be beneficial if the North Grey Union Public Library and the other libraries in Grey County were also on exactly the same system that Bruce County is on, and that is what we are trying to move towards, is for the county to step in and say, okay, a county library system is a few years off. We're not talking about implementing something like that tomorrow, but there are some interim steps, and I really think the county needs to show some leadership in this area and put a little bit of money into it as well. I mean, a motion to encourage isn't quite the same as a motion to fund, and I think that it's important that the county wraps its head around this, and I would encourage our county councillors, as I know that Councillor Judy Gay from Georgian Bluffs is encouraging her county councillors to support this at the county level.
Is there a specific letter, a request to the county in this regard gone already?
Not yet. We're just
Okay.
working on that
Yeah.
presently.
That makes it easier to push it forward.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion, comments? Thank you very much for coming and and providing the answers to a lot of questions that were swirling around in the community. Thanks to the library board, and congratulations to our new CEO, and we'll see you at the library.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Cheers. Okay, we have public question period. Any member of the public here this evening who would like to ask a question of this council? If you could please just step forward to the podium, and if you could just give your name and address for the clerk. And there's a little button on that microphone. If you push it, everyone will be able to hear you properly. Thank you.
My name is Bernice Ackerman. I live at 801A 3rd Avenue West in Owen Sound, and you have my address on the list that I signed. I attended the joint meeting of the Operations Advisory Committee and the Accessibility Advisory Committee held last Thursday regarding the reduction of our bus service from 4 to 3 routes. And I'd like to know what direction council will be giving to staff to advertise the date through the various media available for when this next meeting of this committee, these two committees will be, because it's a very important issue for our community. And although it's a committee meeting, I think the public needs to know when this meeting is, so that if they wish to attend, they can do so.
Sure. Certainly that was, it was a well-attended meeting by some, what I consider to be real experts on sound transit, which is by and large the riders. Both committees it was a very long meeting. Was it 4 hours?
4.5 hours.
It was 4.5 hours. And you know, the last time I was in a meeting that lasted 4.5 hours, I can tell you, I wasn't as energetic and charged up as I was after hearing all of the comments from all of the people around the table. So in terms of next steps, council, I will go to Councillor Twaddle. How is your committee structured, and who is the chair of accessibility?
Janice Curry is the chair of
You're
accessibility.
right here. There we go.
I'm chair of operations.
Yeah.
The intention is that it be at the next meeting of the operation, the same date as the next
Okay.
meeting of the Operations Advisory Committee, which is May the 21st, a week from this Wednesday. I think it's the 21st. Have I got the date wrong?
It would be a week from Wednesday if
Yeah.
it's the 21st.
The time and the location have not yet been determined, but we did indicate that we would advertise on the website and send out a media release as soon as the time and the date are confirmed.
And would that include the newspaper, the radio, et
Oh,
cetera?
yeah, we would send a media release to all the media. That was the intention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Another member of the public is here to ask a question. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. My name is Janice Curry. I am the chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I am a disabled citizen living in this community, and to my left is Dina Henry, who is a member of the Accessibility Advisory Committee and also a disabled local citizen. We would like to speak to council and make a general comment for your consideration for any potential discussion that will arise around the minutes from the joint meeting.
If you can put it in the form of a question, we can keep rolling.
All right.
Put it in the form of a question.
Okay. Well, let me give you a brief preamble then. Accessibility is a principle that, when it is embraced, creates a better community for every citizen. And that is particularly true of public transit. And there are many citizens in this community that have faced a number of challenges that I do not believe were given proper review and consideration when the proposed changes to transit were voted on and endorsed by a bare majority of this council. And specifically, the vacuum or the lack of consideration really embraced the social context, the financial context, even the geography of this community in which transportation is offered, and an appreciation of how changes made by a council can combine to create a community where many citizens who struggle, whether it's financially, whether it's in terms of living with disability, whether it's as a senior citizen who's trying to live in this community and retire here for the rest of their lives, the combination of the policies that you make can either create a community and a level of service delivery where citizens either have to endure or leave, or have the capacity to thrive. And my question is, given how very difficult a reduction in service and level of accessibility, not only in terms of the number of buses, but the route coverage, potentially the size of the buses, and certainly the unanticipated, unconsidered impact on specialized transit and the people who will no longer be able to transition between both services or rely on a level of service delivery that currently meets their needs. Will council choose to embrace a recommendation that forces people to endure or leave this community, or create the opportunity for them to stay and thrive? This, ladies and gentlemen, is the community where we would like to live. It may not be the community where we can.
Thank you very much for your question and for the preamble. Thank you. Did you want to speak as well?
Dina, do you have a comment?
Stand here.
As I'm obviously becoming more and more disabled, I'm finding it very hard to be able to stay in this community with the direction it's been going. And it's a community I've chosen to come to, and essentially I'm being forced to leave if it continues. Like, I know there's all difficulty over the old terminal building versus a covered terminal building. I, for numerous reasons, could not use an exposed covered building in the winter or the very hot summer because it would render me on the ground in no time. And with the terminal, there's a place to be cold, warm in the winter, cooler in the summer. There's washrooms. There's seats to sit on.
Staff support.
And staff support. And it's, for myself personally, it's becoming more and more prevalent that if these kind of things are taken away from the disabled and the seniors and the mentally challenged members of this city, most of which we are tax-paying, worthwhile citizens for the most part, it is leaving a very, very bad taste within my mouth and within my heart and soul, because I really was believing that this was a place I was going to stay until I die.
Thank you very much.
It's becoming less and less as these things go on.
Certainly, Council, thank you, all three of you, for your comments tonight and for your perseverance in sticking with us on this. Certainly, after the joint meeting of the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the Operations Advisory Committee, it became abundantly clear to me, however, it's not my decision, it's a council decision. It did become abundantly clear to me that a three-route system would not serve the riders, and I will leave it at that. We have any other members of the public that would like to ask a question? Seeing none, correspondence? Yes, Councillor McManaman.
If it would be acceptable to council, could we move item 12B forward, the former RCA lands rezoning?
Delighted to. 12B4, this is a report, official plan amendment number 5 and a zoning bylaw amendment for the former RCA lands to allow for some residential development. What is council's direction? This is one of those very potential good news stories we should be smiling about, and the foresight of these developers, I think, is to be applauded. Councillor Purdon.
Could we, I'd be happy to move the motion, but could we have a bit of an overview of the
Yes, of
the
course.
plan?
And I'm not sure if our planner is going to do that or if the director is going to do that.
Your Worship, I'll start, and if there's any other questions, we'll go to Ms. Balban. Glenn Shields, representing the developers, also here. So, Council will recall that last October we had a technical report and a public meeting regarding a proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. The idea really was using the industrial transition provision that Council had approved for your official plan to go through the tests that are outlined in the official plan with respect to a residential redevelopment of these lands. They're called industrial transition area. So there's an official plan amendment. A zoning bylaw amendment proposes to zone the site residential 3, so a low medium density to permit singles, semis, and townhouses. There is a change in lot coverage as well as provision to provide some relief with respect to front yard setback. The critical part of reviewing this application, in addition to working with the nearby industries, was the peer review with respect to the industrial study. And the conclusions of that, the peer review, are included in the application or in the report. But the city's peer reviewer did conclude that there are sufficient industrial lands, and that the change, the loss of these lands from employment lands will not have any negative impact on the city in terms of providing competitive land supply through the next 20-year planning horizon. They also looked at land use compatibility, and the recommendations in terms of the completion of land use compatibility studies, noise, dust, urban design have been included in the official plan amendment that's before council this evening, as well as included as a condition to remove the holding provision. The report goes through the provincial policy in the city's official plan, but the conclusion is that the proposed applications are consistent with the PPS and the city's official plan, and staff are certainly recommending the approval of both the official plan amendment number 5 and zoning amendment number 10, which would permit the future residential redevelopment of these lands. At that time, there would be a formal application for subdivision or condominium approval.
Councillor Purdon.
I would like to make the motion to receive the report and approve the bylaw and the adoption official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. The motion on the floor, Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, we've just come through, 2 comments. We've just come through a fairly messy winter, an old-fashioned winter, I've heard it called. Is the new minimum front setback going to give adequate space for snow storage? This is a critical issue in some of our neighborhoods, as you're aware.
Through you, Your Worship, the plan of subdivision will provide further opportunity for review in detail. However, the zoning does permit a setback to the garage of 6 meters and a setback to the front of the other part of the dwelling of 5.5. This is a larger setback being required by the city than what the developer had applied for, primarily to account for things like snow removal. So not exactly as it was proposed, but certainly these setbacks are supported by our engineering division.
Okay, and part 2 of my question, I may have missed it, but are they required to put a bus shelter in on the East Bay Shore?
Through you, Your Worship, that is something that we would deal with at the time of subdivision approval.
Thank you.
Very good. Further discussion? Questions? Comments? Thank you very much. Thank you to staff for the report and the good work on this moving forward. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Congratulations. Step 1. Thank you very much. Okay, we are going back now to correspondence. The Cement Association, this is on some proposed changes to the Ontario Building Code. Comments, Councillor Body.
I move that we note and file.
Sure. Okay, discussion, Councillor McManaman.
Just, Your Worship, these comments are of a technical nature. Have these been circulated to the fire chief and the CBO, would be my question.
If that's council's direction, that's what we'll do.
No, my question is, have they been?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Through you, Your Worship, the
There we go.
CBO is aware of the proposed amendments. He advises me that their provincial association is providing comments on the proposed changes and are advocating that if the changes were to go forward, that those buildings would be sprinklered.
That was a good question.
Those are good answers, too.
And a good
Thank you.
answer, yes. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Correspondence from Minister Michael Cotu, Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration. This is the Ontario Medal for Good Citizenship. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship, I think we have a huge number of people who would certainly qualify for this, and I believe it's Parks and Recreation that looks after these nominations.
So refer to Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a correspondence from Dana Getz, President QP Local 1189, with regards to Building Canada Fund P3 screen. Council's direction. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd move we receive the letter. This is projects at $100 million and over. That's a long time in the future before we're going to get there. I think we're just about to embark on the biggest project we're going to see, we've ever seen, and we're going to see is at $45 million for the wastewater treatment plant. I believe that we always need to keep our options open for ways to proceed with projects. And even now, we should be looking at, and at least considering the opportunity for P3s, which is public-private partnership. So.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We're at reports of committees and city staff. 12A1, we have a report from the event. Oh, sorry, this is all consent agenda. 12A1 through 12.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We are at 12B1, report from the Director of Financial Services with regards to membership of the Council Remuneration Committee. Council's direction. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Excuse me, I would move. I'm just busily turning pages. Thank you, Councillor Lemon. If we could, I would move that we appoint Ed Delaplante, Francesca Dobbin, Paul Foster, Robert Garnett, Terry Green, Bob Hope, and Garth Pierce to the committee.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from the Director of Financial Services with regards to the funding agreement, federal gas tax funds. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. I will move the recommendation, but I do have a question. Just exactly, help me understand, why are we getting less money? Seems to me that we're still buying gas as more than usual, and I thought this was based on gas that you used, but we're getting less.
Thank you. Through your worship, as Mr. Power mentioned earlier this evening, the gas tax is distributed based on population throughout Canada and then throughout the provinces. And Ontario will be getting less as Ontario's population has not been growing as rapidly as some of our neighbors. And then within Ontario, Owen Sound's population has been growing less than the average as well. So that's the reason for the decline in our funding.
So we do have a motion. Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Councillor Lemon.
Your Worship, some time ago at council, I believe it was at council, we had some discussion about that if our transit system was outside the municipality, i.e. Georgian Bluff Sunset Strip, that gas tax money could flow to Georgian Bluffs and thus to us. Has anything been done on exploring exactly how that would be done?
Through your worship, that's actually another gas tax fund. That's the gas tax for public transit, which is provided by the province.
This is just the federal?
This is federal, correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I have not pursued with our neighbors that option, as they have not asked for our input at this time.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Item 12B3, this is from our purchasing agent with regards to the supply of granular material. Councillor Lemon.
Move the recommendation as it is the lowest tendered price for the aggregate. And the recommendation is for Sutherland's, Harold Sutherland Construction. And I would move that.
Certainly need lots of aggregate to fix all those roads. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We have, we've done this one. We have minutes of boards and committees. 12C1, the Bylaw Committee. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to I would move adoption of all the minutes.
Okay.
And with regards to the minutes that came late, with regards to the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the Operations Advisory Committee joint meeting, I would ask that the last item be pulled. The last motion, the motion by Councillor Lemon, approval of additional costs to retain Mr. Fletcher to answer a number of the questions that were raised at that meeting. I'd just like to make an addition to that motion.
Sure, so we'll pull that particular motion. The motion is to approve the balance of the minutes. Councillor
I
Wright.
would like that second last motion to be pulled as well. I'd like a whole report.
Well,
That
I'm-
recommendation of council with respect to a 3-week system be pulled as well.
Thank you.
So we're approving everything but that 27 minutes.
Yep, that's fine. I'm comfortable with that.
Can we pull the whole set of minutes,
Yeah,
just to
that's-
keep
I'm-
it
yep.
procedurally a little tidier?
I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Worship. Just a note in the Finance Advisory Committee minutes that the final tax rates have been set and that basically the commercial tax rate didn't go up at all in 2014 and the industrial rate only went up slightly. So I think those are things that shouldn't just pass by. Those are important points in our budget. The commercials went up 0.03 and the industrial went up 0.87, so less than 1% in both cases. Important points to note.
Accurately so. Councillor Adair?
And sorry, Your Worship, sorry if I'm, and I thank you to Councillor Boddy, I missed large industrial, actually tax rate's gone down nearly 4%. Thank you for that point.
Councillor Adair.
Thank you. Actually, it was on that very issue that I wanted to speak to Your Worship. For about, well, since we joined the county, we have been pushing down our commercial industrial rates and large residential rates to meet the county rates. As we push those down, there's only one other place that can go, and that's on to the residential taxpayer of Owen Sound. We know that our industrial and commercial rates are not out of the ordinary for other municipalities our size throughout the province, our comparators. As we talk about Orangeville and Stratford, we're in that bar. The reason that we're lowering them as we move forward and putting that tax burden on the ratepayers, the residential ratepayers, is because we're blending our rates with the county. Mm-hmm. The county's rates are extraordinarily low. They don't really bear any comparison to what else is going on in the province. Is there any movement on the part of the county as the city tries to move down towards their unreasonably low rates of the county moving their rates marginally and meet us somewhere in the middle? It has been Owen Sound taxpayers who have been taking the burden of blending these particular rates. And I think there's a role here for the county to meet us halfway, or at least somewhere in the middle.
Let me go to Councillor Wright for comments on this particular item as a member of the committee at the standing committee at the county who really delves into this in great detail. Councillor Wright.
Well, I'm not quite sure that my fellow councillor, the county doesn't pay less assessment, believe me. It's just a different way they do it. And if you've got the next 2 hours, we can explain it. But maybe Mr. Ritchie could do it in 5 minutes, but it's not an easy thing to do. It's all this capping business and everything that we have to bring ours up. We've got so many years to do it, and we are on a plan in order to make it, and this was agreed to in 2001 when we joined the county, but perhaps Mr. Ritchie can follow through on that.
Go back to Councillor Adair. Thank you.
I fully understand our plan. I understand the capping that we are doing. I just want to know, is the county going to do something to raise their rates so that we are not in Owen Sound pushing all of ours onto the residential taxpayer?
Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Dare is speaking of our tax ratios, and correctly so, we are moving our business tax ratios on commercial, industrial, down to the same ratios over time as the county. Council will recall it was about a 30% movement when we started. We've certainly made some great inroads into that. Perhaps in discussions with the county treasurer, I can see if there might be any interest on their part to move their commercial ratios perhaps higher. It's worth a discussion, and that would ease the burden. Certainly what we found out in our latest tax study is our commercial industrial tax ratios compared to other urbans throughout Ontario are pretty much online. We are challenged by trying to get to the tax ratios of the county, which are well below the ranges of fairness in Ontario. So there may be some capacity for them to move their ratios up. There may not be. It's certainly a decision of the county, but I could speak with their treasurer and see if there'd be any interest in moving marginally.
Councillor Wright, thank you.
Actually, I can raise this tomorrow morning. We have a meeting, a financial meeting tomorrow, and I will raise the issue and bring you back an answer.
Here we go. Councillor Purdon.
It's not in regards to this matter. We finished with this discussion. I just wanted to point out with the DIA minutes, there's the annual report from the DIA, and some very good news from the DIA with 15 new stores in the downtown area and a balanced budget, a new strategic plan, and a lot of happiness with the complementary parking, that the merchants and owners there are very positive about it. So I just want to bring the public's attention to the good things that are happening in the downtown.
Thank you. Further discussion on any of these particular minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, that is carried. Bring council's attention to the Joint Operations Advisory and Accessibility Committee. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. The final motion that was made at that meeting, let me just back up a little bit. It was, has been acknowledged, a long meeting. I think it was a very productive meeting in terms of identifying a number of questions that still need to be answered before any final decision can be made. And the motions that are contained in that reflect that. We'd asked for some more information about the buses, the size of the buses that are being proposed by First Student. Just to clarify for the folks watching at home, the new contract with the new service provider requires the provider to provide the buses. The selection of the buses is in consultation with the city. That's a change. In the past, the city have owned the buses and they've been maintained and operated by the contractor. So the first motion requires that. The second motion by Councillor Lemon arose out of some concern that if the three-route system as proposed were to go forward, that there would be increased pressure on the capacity for specialized transit with only one bus. So we're looking for more information about that potential impact and the cost. Councillor Lemon's motion, I believe, was to compare the cost of a three-route system with two specialized transit buses, anticipating the potential need for that increased level of service on specialized transit with the cost of a four-route system with one specialized transit bus as currently exists. And that recommendation was just for a staff report to compare those two prices. The final recommendation from the committee was that we retain the consultant, Mr. Dennis Fletcher, to complete the route validation. There were a number of questions being asked about the routes, and we had used the money that had been allocated by council. There was a request from staff that there be some additional budget so that Mr. Fletcher could answer those questions. And I'm going to ask that that motion be amended, that final motion, be amended to include asking Mr. Fletcher to provide a route option for a 4-route system with a centralized transfer station.
Okay, so we're going to go to Councillor Adair first.
So the motion is that Mr. Fletcher continue his work on what a 3-route with a central terminus would look like, a central transfer point, and also ask him to look at what a 4-route with a central transfer point would look like. Is there a cost? Would he be providing us with a costing, or does Councillor Lemon's previous motion deal with that? I don't know if it quite does. I have a couple other.
I think just to answer that, Councillor Lemon's previous motion addresses the costs based on a current contract with First Student. The cost for a 4-route system with a centralized transfer station, it would not be Mr. Fletcher's role to provide that cost. That would come out of discussions with First Student and the existing contract that we have. That's my understanding. But this, and the reason I'm asking this is that the 3-route system as proposed has at least 2 and perhaps more significant service gaps. So as it was proposed, it doesn't achieve what I personally believed a 3-route system could achieve. And I don't know that that can be addressed. So I'm asking that we have the other option for a 4-route system. I mean, in fairness, I think we need to say that the current 4-route system also doesn't work, doesn't run on time. There need to be refinements and adjustments to make sure it works. So my proposal is to look at, is not to stop looking at the 3-route system, because that may well be manageable with some revisions. I don't know that. But to also have this information, because I know when we come back in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have more questions about that, and I'd like to have the opportunity to have more answers prepared rather than delay this decision again for another period of time and another set of expenses.
Okay, I have lots of speakers. What motion are we speaking to be clear right now? What original motion? I know there's an amendment.
Yeah, that's the final motion.
So that council approve any additional costs to retain Mr. Fletcher, and so to the original motion, can I get a mover to that particular motion?
Well,
I think we'll do.
I'm moving that motion with an amendment, Your Worship, which I'm
and that's
entitled to do. Just that one piece. I've asked that
Okay.
one piece be pulled from the minutes at this point.
So only this motion?
Only that motion.
Okay. Now
The first motion or the second motion?
Second.
That's the third motion,
It's
Councillor.
the third in the
It's your motion that
Okay.
council approve any additional cost to retain Mr. Fletcher to complete the Owen Sound route validation and transfer optimization from the transit review budget. No, it should be from the transit reserve budget, not review.
Yeah.
However, I'm moving that with the amendment that Mr. Fletcher also look at a 4-route system with a central transfer point.
Okay.
Yes, and I hope this is a friendly amendment. When we're comparing apples and apples, we have to also look at the decrease in the amount of ridership we can anticipate with the 3-route system. The original financials didn't take that into account.
Yes, they did.
I do not believe they did, because
They certainly did.
I will defer to the city treasurer whether or not those figures did include.
I'm going to go right to the city manager.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. On the first question that was asked, what's the what's the cost of an additional bus, essentially, whether it is specialized transit or for the other routing. The buses, the way our contract works, each bus essentially has a set cost. Doesn't matter whether it's for specialized or it's for the regular routes. Because they all work on the same number of hours, and we pay by those hours. So arguably, you could say a 3-route system with 2 specialized buses would more or less cost the same as a 4-route system with 1 specialized bus. Now that, you know, you have to do a plus and minus on that, but because our contract is based on a set cost per hour, that's how that works. And we have the same hours for both sets of buses. And the rates are exactly the same. You may have some slight variation in fuel costs, and we pay that. When we did the analysis on the 3-route system, I believe we built in a 10% reduction in fares. So those 2 things. What I'm hearing this evening, because I need to have some clarification, is that we're essentially asking for the consultant to do the same route validation that he did for the 3-route system for a 4-route system.
Yes, that's,
Because he essentially got the 3-route validation done.
That's right.
And I would suggest to you, any fiddling with that system, the 3-route validation that he's done is simply going to impact in a different area.
That's correct. There were some specific issues raised, though.
Right.
I don't know whether he will be able to address them, but
I have talked to
He
him.
may.
I will certainly ask him again, but I think he's going to tell you, well, you know, pick your poison.
you can only poke the balloon. It's got to
Right.
pop out somewhere else.
Right. He stripped that down to the degree he can.
I believe that's the case. But there were some questions there that I think he was going to come back with.
So I'm happy
Some
to
further
say to him,
information.
okay, do the same analysis for a 4-route system with a common transfer point.
That's the intent of my motion. Thank you.
Seems pretty clear now. Councillor Wright?
Thank you very much. I certainly support what the amendment to that motion is, and I will support that, but I think that the motion above it should be rescinded. I can't understand why we are now going to compare costs of a 3-route and 2 buses and then a 4-route with 1 bus. We were already, this here to me should supersede this other motion, and this motion should be rescinded, and we should just simply look at the 4-route system.
Okay, let's deal with one motion at a time, and comments taken, though. Councillor Adair, you had your hand up.
Well, I'm just, I think that, I'm just trying to get clarity on the motion, and I think that's been mostly done. So what we're asking is, we had the 3-route that the consultant has done, and we're asking for him to do the same thing for 4. So it's not tinkering with the 4-route system we have. It's taking that wealth of information we now have about where people are going, where they're coming from, how often they ride, how old they are. We know so much more about our riders now in almost every respect than we did 6 to 8 months ago, certainly than a year ago.
Yeah.
We now have a marketer would drool over the information that we have gathered through the public meetings and the consultations and the surveys and everything. So it's that information he's going to take as if we don't already have a transit system. Because if it's just about tinkering with the 4-route system we have now, we've been doing that for years, and it's never really worked because we've had this terminal that everything has to go back to, and it's not, the only reason it was located there is because the city owned a piece of abandoned land there. It was not put there because that's the best location. So
Okay, Councillor Purdon, then Councillor Twaddle.
Yes, I do support the motion, and I just wanted to comment that the meeting that we had showed that the three-route system that was validated was actually not going to be meeting the needs of many of the people who use the transit system, and would likely have an impact on specialized transit. So I think that's how we've arrived there. And also the importance of being able to meet the needs of people who use the transit system now is something that we committed to when we discussed all of this with transit. So I would support the motion.
Okay, further discussion. Councillor Lemon, then Councillor McManaman.
I will ask for a vote of record.
Okay, Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I thank Councillor Lemon for making that motion. I was going to make it myself. So now I'm to understand, after a year and a half of intense discussion, public meetings, I don't know how many public meetings we had on this topic.
17.
17.
17.
And after numerous votes of the majority of this council, I will acknowledge that certain members did not vote for it, but numerous times, and I don't have that number off the top of my head, the majority of this council voted to move towards this, in this direction, that we are proposing to backtrack on that decision, which is fine. Every member can defend their position on that as they see fit. My question is, the decision on the three-route system was not made in isolation. It was after 6 months worth of discussion and study. We looked at the 30-minute service as opposed to an hour-long service. We looked at Saturday service or not Saturday service. We looked at 4 routes versus 3 routes. The one that this council decided on was a 3-route system to move forward on. That was the change the majority of this council numerous times moved forward on. So my question is, if our transit expert, Mr. Fletcher, is going to look now at a 4-route system again, are we also instructing him to look at the other options that were on the table? The hour-long service, the Saturday service, or any of the other options? Or is this council just basically saying we are not going to find any cost efficiencies in the transit service and we're backing away from something that we've stood for a year, and the majority have stood for a year and a half? I guess that's my question. Is Mr. Fletcher going to look at, instead of cherry picking one, is he going to then evaluate all the different services?
My understanding of this motion would be no. It is, I'll go to the mover of the motion, but it seems fairly focused. Councillor Twaddle.
I was a longtime supporter of the 3-route system because I believed it would work. It doesn't work. It fails to serve the largest single block of individuals who depend on transit. It became readily apparent when those routes were brought forward. We can still go with that as a council. That's every individual council member's right to make that determination. But when I go back to the beginning of this process, there were some certain fundamental principles that we accepted. One of them was that transit is a service that's very important, and the people who depend on transit are the people who really need public transit and who don't have the other options. I firmly believed for a long time that we could meet those needs with a 3-route system. We rejected things like 45-minute service because it didn't meet the need. When this information comes back, I will concede that our hourly service as opposed to half-hour service will be on the table for council. And that information is already available in previous reports that will tell us what the difference is, and council can make that determination at the time. The reason I want to see this 4-route validation is because there is a significant portion of the city that is not going to be adequately served on a 3-route system. I wish the 3-route system had worked. I firmly believed in it. But all the evidence that we got says that it doesn't work, and it misses the needs of a large group of people, and I can't support that. And I always reserve the right to make the best decision I can based on the information that's before me. And we have spent almost 2 years asking questions and listening to people. And there's been a perception, and I will say it's been perhaps a misperception, that we have not been listening. That certainly, I can only speak for myself, that's not the case. That's absolutely not the case. And if we could never change our minds on any decision that comes before this council, then we would be in a sorry state. The motion that I have put forward is to validate a 4-route system with a central transfer point, based on all the information that Councillor Adair just enumerated, and based on the fact that we know the current 4-route system doesn't work. The buses frequently are running late. There are frequently problems because the routes are too long. We know that there still need to be some adjustments. We know that. So the information that we would need to say, well, if the cost is too much, cut Saturday service, go to hourly service during the off-peak. There are still lots of options. I don't think we need Mr. Fletcher to spend the next 9 days trying to go through that information, because we already have it, and that information can come forward to council when council makes its ultimate decision based on whatever recommendations come out of the meeting a week from Wednesday.
Councillor Adair and Councillor Purdon.
Thank you, Worship. I've looked at the 3-route system, and I know what our riders have said. They want a half-hour system. We know where they are. We know where they're wanting to go. We haven't been able to make a 3-route system that accommodates that. I supported the 3-route system because we are trying to have a sustainable system. We cannot have a system that costs $1.2 million. If we have a system that costs $1.2 million, in 2 or 3 years, we will not have transit in Owen Sound. Period. It will disappear. There will be no transit. There will be no specialized transit. There will be no other kind of transit. It will be gone. If we put in a 3-route system that does not serve the needs of the riders, that is not going to where they live, or at least to the areas of the city where they are going to live, in 2 or 3 years, we are not going to have a transit system. We're not going to have specialized transit. We're not going to have public transit. It will be gone because we will have no riders. So somewhere between $1.2 million and serving the needs of our riders, we have to meet somewhere there. The 3-route, I thought, was where we needed to go, but it doesn't work. Perhaps if we didn't have the harbor and the city was a little more compact, perhaps if we had more roads down the hills, we could do it, but our topography doesn't seem to allow us to do that. If we can do a 4-route system that's within the budgetary framework in which we have been working, a budget that I am happy with, then I think that is where we need to be. We have had considerable savings by tendering out and going with First Student, and there are considerable savings by not having that underutilized terminal that's just sitting there sucking up money. If we can have 4 routes that meet somewhere so people can transfer, I think we're there for both the savings that we have been trying to achieve, but I want to see that. That's why I want to see what the costing is when we get there. And the needs of our riders. And that really, from the very beginning, I supported the 3 routes because I thought that's where we need to go. My option was providing the best service that we can afford. And I'm still there at the best service that we can afford. I want to see what that looks like.
Thank you, Councillor Purdon, and Councillor McManaman, and then we'll go to Councillor Twell. We'll wrap it up. Oh, I'm sorry, and Councillor Purdon, immediately following you, we're going to go to Councillor Chamberlain. I apologize.
Just a few comments. This has been an exhaustive process, and I think at this council table, it's taken a lot out of everybody. There's been a strong belief in the 3-route system. There's been a strong belief in the 4-route system. I think it's a good idea to validate the 4-route system. We certainly heard last week that the 3-route system does not meet the needs of the people who need the service and doesn't offer much in an opportunity for growth of the system. The least we can do as a council is to look at the validation of the 4-route system. If we can get a workable transit system that we can afford, we'll all be happy. I'm sure everybody at this table will be really happy, and we can move forward. So I really support doing the 4-route validation study. I think many people who came to the consultations, I know it was exhaustive, but many, many people did say they had deep concerns about a 3-route system all along. So what we heard on Thursday was just a culmination of all of that.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you. I do think we do have a price for the 4-route system for a student, because that was one of the things that we had when we turned it down. We had a price for that. So we have that one, but that's the existing 4-route. So my understanding with this motion is that when he says validation, he doesn't mean the existing 4-route, he's going to try to make it a better 4-route based on all the information. So the other thing is, I thought Mr. Fletcher did a very good job, and I was very pleased, and I'm pleased that we are giving him some more time. But it says here, any additional costs to retain him, so we don't really know that figure yet. But I wondered if, you know, if he is going to validate 4 routes, and we know where the people want to go, if we can't be looking at all of those routes, so he does a full report on that. I don't know if he can do it in the amount of time that he's been given.
I'm sure he can.
Okay.
He has so much information. I am confident that he can do it.
Okay, but are we just going to have him do it as at a place with a centralized transit, what do we call that?
Transfer point.
Transfer point.
That's the motion on the floor.
So can we not have him take a look at using the terminal as one of those things too?
That's not part of this motion. If that was the wish, it could be a subsequent motion.
So it'd be after this one? It'd be after
If that's the wish of council. We're dealing with the motion put forward by
Well, we've heard
Councillor
several
Powell.
comments about the weather and different things, and we seem to have a place already organized. It's just a thought. I would like to go that route if we could, have at least comment on it,
Okay.
because it'd be part of the study, right? Because that's what
Okay.
he's doing. So whether that would have to be, do I do an amendment to the one that's there, or do I do a separate one?
It would,
Be a
I
friendly
don't
amendment.
imagine it would be a friendly amendment.
That'd be a friendly amendment.
Okay.
So you would have to do a separate motion
Okay.
after this one has
Okay.
been voted on.
All right, I will do that way.
Ms. Corsi.
I am concerned about the timing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be talking to Mr. Fletcher on this till tomorrow at the earliest. And I've heard comments, so I can certainly try to have it for next week, but what I can't ask is that we give lots of lead time for people to look at those routes, because I simply won't have them. So if people are willing to examine them in very short order before the meeting, I will certainly propose that. It's a very important job you're asking Mr. Fletcher to do.
We don't want to
And
necessarily
it's
rush
less than a week
at this point.
that you're asking him to do it in.
Sure.
I think we should change the date.
It's something as to time that hasn't been discussed, so again, I'll defer to council's deliberations to determine a deadline. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. These will be my last comments this evening on this matter. I would agree with several comments that would have been made. It has been an exhaustive process for 2 years. We determined the route to go, and now we're backtracking on that without looking at any of the other options that were on the table. I would agree that it's an essential service. We learned that early on in the process. Unanimously, numerous times this council has said that the transit system is an essential service to many in this community. We also said we wanted to have a financially sustainable system, as Councillor Adair said earlier. We're asking our expert to validate a 4-route. He's the expert on the matter, but we're not asking him to look at any of the other cost-saving measures that were put in place, that were on the table, to make it a financially sustainable system. So I'm not sure how we're going to fulfill that part of the of the mandate of this council. We wanted to save the taxpayers' money and continue to provide an essential service for now and down the road. If we're taking the 3-route off the table, which it seems that's the way council wants to go tonight, but we're not going to do anything else in place to ensure the financial sustainability of the system moving forward. And I believe Mr. Fletcher, as the city manager has just said, he's given about 10 days and a very scoped what he's to be looking at. He clearly is not going to be looking at any of those other things that were on the table. So I look forward when this report comes back. I guess the councillors will have to bring that forward, their cost-saving measures, because that's my question. The financial sustainability of the system for now and in the future that saves the taxpayers money and is still a good system, provides that essential service to the people that need it. That ought to be an interesting discussion. I look forward when the councillors bring those ideas forward. That's all, Your Worship. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Lemon's already asked for a recorded vote.
Yep. Councillor Twaddle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to quickly address again Councillor McManaman's concerns, all of those other options are still before council. And we can make that decision, or those decisions, around the information on what a workable 4-route system would look like. I from the very beginning of this process, actually from the very beginning of my time on council, I recognized that the transit system is very important. And if I may be permitted just one personal observation as I wrap up this debate. When my daughter went to school in Dallas, Texas, she lived in a small suburb of Dallas, small being relative. The suburb was larger than the city of Owen Sound. That community consciously chose not to offer public transit. And the reason they didn't want public transit is because they didn't want the kind of people who depended on public transit living in their community. That, quite bluntly, is not the kind of community I want to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? To the motion. Yes, I'll ask the clerk to poll council, please.
Councillor Adair. Councillor Boddy.
Against?
Councillor Chamberlain.
In favor.
Councillor Lemon.
Strongly in favor.
Councillor McManaman.
Opposed.
Councillor Purdon. Councillor Twaddle.
In favor?
Councillor Wright.
In favor.
Mayor Haswell.
In favor.
Motion is carried with 7 in favor and 2 opposed.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
I have, want to put a motion on the floor that we rescind the above motion, that the recommendation to council with respect to consultants' preferred meeting when staff can bring forward a cost estimate, I think that would just be time-consuming for staff, so I'm asking that that be rescinded.
Okay, to the motion. Councillor Lemon?
As the mover of the motion, I have no problems with it being rescinded.
Thank you.
Because we've covered it off in what we've already passed.
Thank you. Councillor Adair?
Just wondering, Your Worship, I mean, at some point, council actually needs to make a decision, and I'm wondering if this report can come directly to council and not wind its way over the next couple of months through committees and just come here.
Councillor Chamberlain, I think I know, you want me to come back to you on that other motion? Yeah, sure, okay. So Councillor Twaddle?
We have a committee system in place for a purpose. The committee met for a lengthy meeting last Wednesday to go through some very detailed reports. Committee members put a lot of effort into it. They had a lot of questions they needed to do. We've made a commitment to consult. I absolutely believe that this needs to go back through the committee system. We need to get, I mean, we've spent all this time getting to this point to make a decision. We need to make a decision not in haste, but thoughtfully. So I believe it should continue to go back to the committee. The committee should meet next week. If that's not enough time for Mr. Fletcher, I'm sure that we can find within a short period of time a convenient time to hold a joint meeting. Yeah.
Ms. Corsi?
I did wonder if the committee might want to continue with the bus size selection issue, because I know First Student is going to try and bring a bus, and allow Mr. Fletcher the opportunity to present what he has that might continue to be refined after that date.
That, yeah, I agree. We need to make,
So he would be there, you might not have complete information from him
Yeah.
at that point.
that's fair. I agree, we need to move expeditiously on the bus decision, no matter what.
Councillor Lemon and then Councillor Wright.
Under the authority of the Ontarians with Disabilities Act, I believe the consultation would be mandatory, where any planning in terms of the bus system in respect to stops, et cetera, has to go through the accessibility committee, and it's specific in the act.
Okay, Councillor Twaddle.
Well, just to clarify, Councillor Lemon's correct that that needs to come, the Accessibility Advisory Committee needs to be consulted on that. At this point, none of the issues that require consultation with the Accessibility Advisory Committee have come forward except the buses to make sure that they comply with the AODA standards. There will be future discussion around the design of stops and shelters and the location, and that's the consultation that will be required. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Councillor Lemon. I'm just pointing out that we're not at that stage in the process yet.
Councillor
The
Wright?
reason I said that, Councillor, is we are in deficiency because of January 1st, 2013, we are in requirements to have a accessibility plan for the city in transit, and there was supposed to have been a public meeting with the specialized transit committee, accessibility committee, and the public and those persons with disabilities.
Councillor
That's why I
Wright?
believe it is.
Thank you very much. Just as a mover of that, to rescind that, I'm not objecting to the May 21st meeting. I'm just objecting to the asking staff to prepare additional costs, because I don't think they're required.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Councillor McManaman, or did I? Okay, thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
I'd like to put another motion on the floor that would ask Mr. Fletcher to also comment on using the terminal as part of the four-route system, so we at least have something to look at with that as far as the transfer or the transfer.
Okay, we have a
that
motion
clear?
on the floor. Discussion, Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this, but since we're throwing everything out that was done before, we might as well ask Mr. Fletcher to look at that too. I don't know why anyone would be opposed.
Councillor Lemon.
Well, I think in light of what we're doing, it would be most appropriate to look at that. We haven't sold it, we still own it. And I have not seen the capital cost of putting the kinds of shelters that would be required if you had another location on Third Avenue, which has been proposed. How many thousands of dollars will we have to spend in there? And what would be operation and upkeep on them?
Councillor Dare.
Well, of course, Councillor McManaman's left. With due respect to Councillor McManaman, there are some aspects of this that we have been over. My issue with the 3-route system is that no matter how you shuffle the deck, no matter how you pull that string, it doesn't do what we need it to do. Adding the expense into the system of $100,000 per annum of operating to have an underutilized terminal that's in the wrong location doesn't make any sense. We're asking Mr. Fletcher to find the optimum route that serves the maximum number of people. Now we're asking him to say, oh, but don't actually do that. Make everything go over here, half a block over, and spend an extra $100,000 on the system. The system will fail if we cannot find an affordable system. If we pass this, we've just added another $100,000 to a system that makes no sense. When Councillor Lemon moved the motion 8 months ago to move forward without the terminal, I supported that. Nothing about the routes or where the routes go has changed in regards to the terminal. 20-some years ago, when we got provincial money to build that, and there were 5 buses coming into the city from outside the city, it may have made sense. It is a big, empty building. As Councillor Purdon once said to me, transit is about buses, not buildings. We need to build the best bus system we can, not the best buildings we can for a transportation system. We need to get people from where they are to where they want to go. So I can't support adding $100,000 to a system before we even look at anything.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dare. I'm going to draw council's attention to the clock. We have a 10:30 curfew, and I don't believe we'll have, there we go, motion to call the question. All those in favor, Councillor Chamberlain's motion. All those opposed? That motion is defeated. Thank you. We need a motion to receive the balance of the joint committee meeting.
Yeah, I would move approval of the minutes of the joint committee as amended, and I believe that would include simply receiving the second last recommendation by Councillor Lemon with regards to the costing of 3 routes with 2 and 2 routes with 4 routes with 1. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes, in-camera minutes, for approval. Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Other business. Councillor
I'm not going to make it.
Wright.
Just, if I may, one question to Ms. Coulter, if I could, through you. I know that we did all receive information about the water flowing over the mill dam, but could you get in touch with Conservation? The Harrison Park looks pretty bad they've blocked off the water coming around the island for some reason or other. I have no understanding why, but it's pretty sick looking, and coming into spring and summer, it'd be nice if we had some water in that part of the park.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
I'll be brief due to the hour. When I was at OSUM, there was an organization that had a speaker there, one of the principal speakers, called 8-80 Cities. And I would ask council if they have time to take a look at that website, and they'll find it really, really interesting, because the motto is if a community is suitable for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, it's suitable for everyone. Something to think about in the long term, and that's all I'll say on that.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes. I was very pleased to be at that Sports Hall of Fame inductee ceremony, and I just wanted to re-thank all of the committee members that put that together, the work put on that, and what a pleasant and very enjoyable evening it was for everybody. Thank you.
Indeed. Councillor Purdon.
Yes, just a little reminder that the One World Festival is coming up. Great event that's right here behind the city and the marketplace on May 23rd. I hope to see all of my councillors there to celebrate diversity in Grey Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Resolution adopting proceedings in committee of the whole, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright, that action taken in committee in the whole in considering public meetings, deputation, public question period, matters arising from correspondence reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business be hereby confirmed by this council.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Notice of motion, new business by resolution, bylaws, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, that bylaw numbers 2014-67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, and 2014-81 be hereby passed and enacted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Sorry, let's do that again. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're now adjourned. Thank you.